A life-changing encounter. For Mitake Yuma, it took the form of a metallic slime. He crouches in a dark, cavernous space, staring at the strange, liquid metal creature that has just appeared before him. He wonders to himself, what is this thing? Back in the present, at 1 in the afternoon over Tokyo Bay, the news reports on a large sinkhole that has appeared near Harumi Pier. The government has dispatched an investigation team, speculating that it might be a small-scale dungeon. The report notes that if certified, it would become the 6th dungeon in Japan. Watching the broadcast is the second-year high school student, Mitake Yuma, lounging on his couch. His attention shifts from the television to his phone, where a popular streamer is broadcasting live. The man, wearing dark sunglasses and sporting thin braids, flashes a peace sign, enthusiastically greeting his viewers on his dungeon channel. The streamer announces that he's currently exploring the 18th floor of the White Dungeon in Sapporo. He excitedly points out the large number of fairy-like monsters swarming the icy cavern. In the distance, a lone figure with long, light-colored hair stands on a high precipice. With a confident grin, he declares he will handle the monster with his thunder magic. A powerful surge of electricity erupts from his gloved hand, striking a nearby creature. His spell is successful, and the monster drops a magic stone. The streamer celebrates, identifying it as a pure white moonstone worth approximately 140,000 yen and declaring it his lucky day. Watching this on his phone, Yuma's expression sours with frustration. It has been 7 years since dungeons first appeared, initially bringing fear and uncertainty. Now they are a major industry. The unknown creatures within them produce magic stones, which in turn are the source of usable magic. Yuma scoffs at the thought, thinking it's all pointless. He believes that even with such fantastical elements introduced to the world, only a select few ever profit. Those with corporate sponsors, those with government-recognized abilities, or popular figures who attract funding. Overwhelmed by a sense of unfairness, he throws his phone down, shouting that the world hasn't changed at all and that an ordinary person like him never gets a chance. His outburst is cut short by the frantic barking of his small, dark-furred pet, Mamizu. Yuma finds this strange, noting that the creature is usually quiet. The persistent barking makes him wonder if someone has entered his garden. He steps outside, his earlier thoughts of despair echoing in his mind. He has no talent, he isn't smart. His life feels utterly predictable. It was in this very state of mind that he had his fateful encounter. He walks into the yard, towards the source of the disturbance. His ordinary life continued, unchanged, until he found the hole in his own garden. There, in the stone paving, was a perfectly circular, dark abyss. Nearby, another, smaller opening presented itself. A horizontal passage in a low stone wall. Flashlight in hand, he cautiously approached it. He paused, his expression hardening with focus. He wondered if something was inside. Crouching down, he shined his light into the darkness. A strange, gelatinous creature with large, vacant eyes stared back. He wondered if the ground had simply caved in, but the presence of this creature, so similar to one he'd seen in a video, suggested otherwise. He pulled out his phone, quickly looking up information on slimes. The article described them as semi-transparent beings of various colors. It mentioned a rare metal slime sighted in America, noted for being incredibly hard and fast, with no confirmed defeats worldwide. Though the creature in the hole was different, the possibility ignited a thrilling idea. If he could defeat it, he would be the first in the world. He questioned if such a small hole could even be a dungeon, dismissing the thought that only a fool would enter. His mind then flashed to a video of a popular dungeon streamer, who acknowledged that the profession of an explorer was one lived side by side with danger. The streamer's voice echoed in his memory, explaining with a wide grin that among the magic stones dropped by monsters, some were traded for hundreds of millions. It was, as the streamer declared, a dreamlike chance. Inspired, he returned to the hole, now armed with a hammer. He reasoned that with the creature being so small and having no escape route, the risk must be minimal. As he crouched and raised the hammer, the red slime suddenly launched itself forward, a blur of motion leaping directly at him. He yelled in frustration as the creature dodged. His hammer struck its body, but it bounced off with a sharp, metallic clang. The creature was incredibly hard, and a powerful vibration shot up his arm from the impact. He recoiled, a sharp jolt of pain shooting through his hand. The impact against the slime's unyielding body felt like striking solid steel, leaving the creature completely unfazed. Retreating inside, he pressed an ice pack to his swelling hand, grimacing from the ordeal. He warned his small pet, Mamizu, to stay away from the hole, explaining that a vicious monster was lurking there. He was left pondering how he could possibly defeat such a thing. His frustration mounting, he searched for information on slimes, only to find articles stating they are weak monsters easily beaten even by children. "That's a lie," he exclaimed. The research continued, noting that slimes are typically slow and vulnerable to physical attacks. However, it also specified that powerful monsters in deep dungeons are immune to physical damage and require magic. He stared at his phone, confused. The hole was barely a meter deep, so what had he just fought? He briefly considered the need for magic, but sighed, knowing he couldn't use any. It seemed he would have to give up. But then, an idea sparked. He sat upright, a new line of reasoning forming. If he couldn't use magic, perhaps he could simply burn it. He theorized that if the creature was metallic, then fire might be the key. With newfound resolve, he retrieved a portable gas burner from his home. He crept back to the hole, carefully trying to approach the slime without being noticed. As he aimed the burner, the creature suddenly shifted. "Damn it, stay still," he shouted in frustration. His shout was too late. The slime lunged, striking him with incredible force and sending another searing jolt of pain through his body. Yuma collapses onto the floor of his room, face down beside his table, utterly spent. Lying there, he considers his options. He could just cover the hole with a board and pretend he never saw it. Or, as the news advised for dungeons on private property, he could report it to the authorities. But he dismisses the idea, thinking it's too much trouble. He cries out in frustration, exclaiming that he's had enough. He laments that he never gets a lucky break. If only he hadn't found it, he wouldn't have to deal with this pain and trouble. It feels like it's always been this way for him. Nothing in his life has ever gone smoothly. In the dark pit below, the metallic slime sits motionless. He moves to the window, sitting on the floor and staring out at the bright, shimmering water, a world away from the darkness beneath his home. But a thought nags at him. He knows he should just leave it, walk away. So why does it bother him so much? Unable to shake the feeling, he springs into action, searching through his closet. A moment later, he pulls out an item with a triumphant cry. Found it. He examines a can of cooling spray. He reasons that if insecticide can freeze bugs in place, perhaps this could do the same to the metal slime. While it wouldn't be enough to defeat it, he has another idea. What if he heats it with a gas burner right after? He recalls that metal becomes brittle when subjected to rapid heating after being cooled. Now armed with his makeshift equipment, he stands resolutely at the edge of the pit. This is his final challenge, he decides. If this fails, he will give up. He looks down and sees that the slime hasn't emerged from the side tunnel. It's staying deep inside. He realizes he has no choice but to go in after it. With quiet determination, he crouches at the mouth of the dark passage, placing the spray can and gas burner on the ground as he prepares to enter. He begins his assault by dousing the metal slime with a cooling spray. The creature recoils as frost visibly forms on its metallic surface. Seeing this, he realizes his next step is to use the burner. Before he can act, the slime retaliates, spraying a black substance that hits him in the face. He cries out, realizing with alarm that he has been covered in flammable gas. As the slime advances, he notices that the intense cold has made it brittle. Believing one good strike could now shatter it, he grips the hammer he brought, recognizing this as his prime opportunity. He ignites the portable burner, unleashing a powerful jet of flame from its nozzle. The intense heat is immediately followed by a decisive blow from his hammer. With a determined cry, he puts all his force into the swing, striking the thermally shocked creature and causing its body to shatter. The creature is destroyed. Catching his breath, Yuma confirms his victory. He then peers deeper into the now empty tunnel but finds nothing left behind. No magic stone, no drop of any kind. Emerging from the dungeon, he stretches under the bright sun. He reflects that while there was no tangible reward, he feels a profound sense of accomplishment for having faced the challenge and won. And so, the fierce battle between Mitake Yuma and the strange slime came to a close. He calls out to his pet, Mamizu, who is sniffing curiously at the ground where the dungeon entrance had been. That peace, however, was supposed to last. The next day, Yuma lies in bed, feverish and sweating, clearly unwell. His mother appears at his bedroom door. She mentions that Mamizu has been making a racket all morning and asks a weary-looking Yuma if he could go and see what's wrong. He startles, sweat beading on his brow, realizing the source of the commotion. It was his pet, Mamizu, who stood agitated, hissing at something unseen. Elsewhere, deep within a dungeon's cavernous passages, another metal slime has appeared. The scene shifts across the globe to the sprawling metropolis of Tel Aviv, Israel. Here stands the headquarters of the International Dungeon Research Organization, more commonly known as the IDR. Inside, a man named Clark Griffin finds his superior, Ethan Noble, a renowned authority on dungeon research. Clark confirms he has found Ethan, who seems preoccupied. Their attention is fixed upon a colossal stone slab, discovered in the middle layer of the world's deepest dungeon, Orpheus. The slab is covered in ancient hieroglyphs, observed by a young woman with long, light hair. He responds to his assistant's unspoken question, admitting that no matter how many times he sees the slab, he never tires of it. With a knowing smile, Ethan reveals the slab's inscription. It foretells that when the demon king indicated upon it awakens, the world will follow a path to ruin. With a piece of paper clenched in his teeth, Cookie Mitamura walks with a heavy tread, his mind stuck in a loop. Day after day, it's nothing but slimes. He mutters in exasperation, wondering what has become of his life. Suddenly, a cheerful voice calls out to him. It's his classmate, Ichino's Kid, who playfully scolds him for his startled reaction. Beside her, Usuware notes that while he usually arrives at the last minute, he's been a bit earlier lately. She reminds him they'll be third-year students soon, a fact Yuma dismisses with annoyance. As they walk, Kid asks Yuma if he knows what Rue has been up to, but he admits he doesn't, since they're in different classes. Kid fondly recalls how the three of them used to play together as children. Changing the subject, Rue announces her future plan, to get a job at a dungeon-related company. Yuma is taken aback, questioning the stability of such a career, but Rue seems to have a different perspective. She looks at him earnestly, explaining that contrary to his assumption, dungeon-related businesses are experiencing a massive boom in popularity and growth. Her words make Yuma recall what he knows about dungeons. There are several types, but the magic stones found in the White Dungeon are particularly valuable because they can heal injuries and cure diseases. This potential has attracted numerous medical corporations to invest heavily in the field. Rue then turns the question back on him, asking if he has considered his own future. She states with unwavering confidence that she has already made her decision, pointing out his ignorance of these popular and important industries. He averts his gaze, a faint, non-committal smile playing on his lips. He has thought about it, he claims, in his own way. Later, inside a dungeon, Yuma consults his phone. A simplified guide explains the basics. Monsters inside dungeons respawn periodically. However, the drop rate from Magic Stone is a discouraging 1%. Looking down from a rocky outcrop, he spots another slime and curses under his breath. His mind races, processing the 1% drop rate. An idea, simple as a child's, forms. If he defeats one a day, he could get a Magic Stone every 100 days. His thoughts escalate wildly. That's a guaranteed 100 million. He then notices this particular slime seems different, rare even. A rare monster's Magic Stone could be worth that much alone. While Rue walks forward with purpose, Yuma is consumed by a different kind of ambition. He thinks that perhaps there's a future for him in making easy money after all. Forgetting about the long term, he focuses on the immediate prize. He raises his hammer, ready to strike. But at that moment, he was still completely unaware of the reality of his situation. His attack lands, but the slime dissolves into nothing. It's another dud. He slams his fist down in frustration, cursing his luck. The hunt yields no results. Again and again, no magic stones appear. He cries out into the cavern, his voice echoing his desperation. A more pressing panic sets in as he realizes his allowance is quickly being depleted by the cost of cooling spray and gas canisters for his burner. Exhausted, he slumps against a rock wall, pleading for a break from the grueling effort. His small companion, Mamizu, senses his fatigue and begins licking his face to comfort him. Yuma thanks the creature, though he remains disheartened by his complete lack of progress. He stares at his dwindling supplies, wondering if he can find them on sale somewhere. The thought of his allowance vanishing for nothing is frustrating, but he steels his resolve, reminding himself it is all for the sake of earning 100 million yen. His determination brings to mind a recent memory of Rue. Her expression pointed as she asked him if he was giving any thought to his future. Walking home from the dungeon, he dismisses the thought aloud. He doesn't know the answer to a question like that. He continues on, his gaze fixed on the supplies in his hand. A deeper doubt surfaces. Is he truly okay with things as they are? As the day ends, snowflakes begin to drift down over the city, heralding a change in the weather and the arrival of a new day. On February 2nd, at school, his childhood friend Rue Usuo waits with a gift bag. Spotting Yuma, she calls out his name with a smile. As she does, a nearby student whispers about a rumor, but Rue pays it no mind, her attention focused solely on him. She presents a gift box, catching Yuma completely off guard. He stammers, realizing it's Valentine's Day, a fact he had forgotten. He asks what she plans to do with the chocolates she's received, and she casually replies that she'll share them with her family. Her attention then returns to him as she brings up a rumor about his supposed interest in working for a dungeon-related company. Yuma vehemently denies it. He then pivots, asking if she received chocolate from Keed, mentioning that he himself hasn't gotten any from her in years. Rue explains that she was simply curious, as it seems Yuma gets gifts every year. Just then, the school bell chimes, and he announces that it's time for him to go, turning to leave. He walks away from the school building, but his departure is cut short as he suddenly yelps, clutching his rear from a sharp, unexpected pain. The source of the pain is Rue, who scolds him for trying to leave so quickly when she intended to give him chocolate. He protests the kick, but she simply offers him a chocolate bar. Flustered, Yuma loudly insists he doesn't want it and doesn't even like sweets. When she questions him, he immediately reverses his stance, admitting through gritted teeth that it was a lie and he actually loves them. He reluctantly accepts the small gift, muttering his thanks. Rue immediately asks what she'll get in return. Annoyed, Yuma tells her not to make assumptions, claiming he get a couple of gifts anyway. She then presses him, asking to see them. As they walk away from school grounds together, Rue bids him a simple farewell. Just as they part, she calls out to him again. He turns, confused, wondering why she would give him chocolate when she hadn't given any to Keed. He asks for her reason, and she replies that it's obvious. She explains her logic with pointed determination. She receives lots of chocolate while he gets none, which she deems unfair. As a childhood friend, she declares it is her responsibility to maintain the balance. Later, under a darkening city sky, Yuma is back in a dungeon. Gripping a can of life force drink, he roars in frustration, questioning the very concept of balance and angrily shouting Keed's name into the cavern. He vents his frustration on a nearby slime, crushing it with a single, contemptuous squeeze. This is all they're good for, he thinks before slumping in dejection. He questions his own actions, feeling lost, and utterly convinced that nothing good ever comes his way. As he wallows in his misery, a strange gurgling sound draws his attention. A metallic-looking slime begins to coalesce before his eyes, its form bubbling into existence. He looks up, his expression shifting from despair to startled confusion. In the space where the creature had been, something new begins to form. A dark, multifaceted object solidifies from particles of light, hanging suspended in the air for a brief moment as he stares in utter disbelief. The object then falls, clattering against the stone floor of the dungeon. This was no ordinary occurrence. It was a unique event, taking place on the 130th day of his relentless campaign of defeating metal slimes. After a long and arduous struggle, Cookie Mitamura lets out a triumphant roar. He has finally obtained the item he has been seeking for so long, a culmination of his efforts in what he has come to know as the magic or dungeon. He holds a small, dark object in his palm, a magic gem. He can hardly believe it took half a year for one to finally appear. His mind immediately races with possibilities. He thinks about the 100 million it must be worth, excitedly planning to buy expensive food for his companion, Mamizu, who dances with joy nearby. He pulls out his phone to confirm its value, but a nagging thought surfaces. The object feels more like iron than a precious gem. He quickly searches online, looking for information on drops from the Black Dungeon, and find a comprehensive guide. The article he reads clarifies a devastating truth. Unlike white dungeons which produce magic gems with healing properties, the Black Dungeon drops something else entirely, a metallic substance known as magic ore. The guide mentions that while there is research suggesting it can improve physical abilities, the effect is not noticeable, and its actual efficacy is unconfirmed. As he continues to read, his face drains of color. The article concludes that because the effort required far outweighs the results, it's considered more efficient to simply do muscle training. Consequently, the market price for magic ore is extremely low. The realization hits him with the force of a physical blow. Crushed, he collapses onto his bed. He opens a drawer to reveal a box filled with the worthless ore. He finally understands. The hole in his yard was a black dungeon. All that effort, all the money he spent, it was all for nothing. Lying there, he reflects on the passage of time. He remembers talking with his friend Keed 5 months ago, just after summer vacation. A calendar shows it is now February. In just 2 months, he'll be a third-year high school student. He laments the months he wasted chasing a dream, realizing he must now seriously consider his future. His thoughts drift to Usuo Rei, who has already chosen her path and is working diligently towards it. He shakes his head, telling himself that her life is her own and has no bearing on his. A new determination takes root. He decides he is his own person and will move forward from this moment at his own pace. As the sun rises over the city, his resolve solidifies. He will forget about the slimes, forget about the magic ore, and simply live his life. He lies in bed, dejected, while Mamizu barks insistently. He hushes the small creature, telling it there's no need to bark anymore. After all, he had filled in the hole yesterday. Despite his efforts, he finds himself back outside. The hole has reappeared, and a slime monster has respawned within it. He stares in shock, realizing the dungeon resets itself overnight. As Mamizu barks at the creature, he wearily tells it to stop. Retreating indoors, he slumps to the floor in defeat. The sound of his despair is interrupted by his mother appearing at the door. She scolds him, telling him to stop what he's doing and be quiet, as he's disturbing the neighbors. Her scolding only adds to his misery. He lets out a loud cry of frustration, screaming that he can't take it anymore. Later, back in bed, he laments not reporting the dungeon immediately. He feels it's too late now. He stares at the dark rock in his hand, the magic ore, and tells it that he wouldn't be feeling this way if it had been a valuable magic gem instead. Sitting at his desk, he gazes at the ore. A new idea forms in his mind. Since he can't sell it, maybe he should try using it himself. To that end, he begins researching online. A video guide appears on his screen, featuring a cheerful woman who explains that consuming a magic gem or is simple. The item is broken down within the body, enabling the user to wield magic. She cheerfully advises disinfecting it thoroughly before consumption. The video continues with a critical warning. These stones contain mana, and a person cannot absorb it if their own mana level is lower than the stones. A graphic illustrates various mana index levels, stressing the importance of checking one's own index before eating a stone. This new information gives him pause. He reads that to use magic from these stones, one needs mana, an electromagnetic wave that increases by defeating monsters. He realizes that after fighting so many slimes, his own mana index might actually be quite high. The article confirms that a personal mana index can be measured using a dedicated device. A flicker of hope returns. He wonders if a measuring device can be bought like a regular appliance. Moments later, he returns from a quick trip, holding a device shaped like a hairdryer. He announces he's bought a mana index measuring device. The 10,000 yen cost is painful for a high school student, but he's just glad he found a used one for cheap. He eagerly points the new device at his unique magic ore, ready to witness the power born from a metal slime. The display, however, reads 2,000 foot. Confused, he tries again, aiming the device carefully, but the result remains stubbornly at 0. Frustrated, He returns to the electronics store, finding himself back at the brightly lit support counter where he had just made his purchase. He explains the issue to the clerk, who apologizes profusely and takes the device to inspect it. 5 minutes later, the clerk returns with a verdict. There are no malfunctions with the device whatsoever. Yuma grits his teeth, insisting the mana index meter he just bought must be broken. To prove its functionality, the clerk shows him the readings from 3 genuine magic gems. A Tsongchung, Sokyu, Aquamarine with a mana index of 1, Tenko, Citron with an index of 2, and a Ryako, Peridot with an index of 3. The device is working perfectly. The clerk calmly confirms that the device is measuring accurately. He then politely asks what kind of object Yuma was attempting to measure. Yuma hesitates, unsure how to explain. He finally admits he was trying to measure a magic Oregon. The clerk nods in understanding, explaining that it's well known that magic ores have a universally low mana index. When Yuma asks if that's why it showed 0, the clerk also asks if he tried measuring his own index, which also read 0. The clerk begins to suggest it's because Yuma's index is low, but Yuma interjects, stating he's defeated over 100 strong slimes. A harsh reality settles in his mind. A person only absorbs a fraction of the mana from a defeated monster. For instance, defeating a creature with a mana index of 100 might only raise one's own index by a single point. It's a common occurrence for someone's mana index not to rise at all, no matter how many slimes they defeat. The weight of this knowledge crushes him. Sitting alone on a park swing, he mourns his wasted 10,000 yen, calling himself an idiot. He can't accept that defeating so many monsters resulted in nothing, but then a horrifying thought strikes him. If he had consumed the ore without checking, he might have ended up painfully expelling a 2 centimeters iron ball. As he swings listlessly, his eyes fall upon a piece of paper on the ground. He mutters about people not throwing away their trash before picking it up, wondering what kind of flyer it could be. His expression transforms from despair to wide-eyed shock. The flyer is an invitation. Let's go play in the Blue Dungeon. Below the title, a promise catches his breath. Get a free and precise mana index measurement. He arrives at a large, modern building, the Musashi Kagane Station branch, certain that this is the place. Looking up at the impressive structure, he feels a surge of hope. Inside, he learns from the receptionist that the fee for a student is 800 yen for the first floor. After paying the fee, he makes his way to the designated mana measuring room. While waiting, he reassures himself that this facility, with its professional equipment, will surely provide an accurate measurement, unlike the cheap, dryer-shaped device he had used before. He believes his efforts will not have been in vain. His hope is that his half-year of dedicated metal slime hunting will finally be rewarded. But when the technician presents the test results, the sheet is filled with nothing but zeros. The technician formally announces the devastating outcome. Staring at the paper, Yuma listens as the technician explains the findings. The man confirms that his mana index is 0 and assures him there can be no mistake, as their equipment is capable of measuring down to 0.01 units. As he stands there, crushed, the technicians begin to converse quietly. They remark that it's common for amateurs to mistakenly believe they've raised their mana index by defeating low-level monsters. One thinks to himself that defeating slimes from a place like the Blue Dungeon would have no effect, but decides not to say it aloud to spare the boy's feelings. Suddenly, the mana measuring device whirs to life with a loud clatter, beginning to eject a continuous sheet of paper. The paper doesn't stop, streaming out and piling up on the floor in an ever-growing mound. The technician and the receptionist stare in utter confusion as the technician mutters, "Hey, what is this?" The technician begins to panic, shouting that the machine can't be malfunctioning. It's a piece of equipment worth hundreds of millions. But amidst the commotion, Yuma is oblivious. He stares intently at the small slip in his hand, his world shrinking to the single, crushing fact written on it. No matter how many times he looks, it still says 0. Cookie Mitamura sits slumped over, staring at a results sheet covered in zeros. He lets out a long sigh, the stark reality sinking in. It was all just a fleeting dream. His dejection curdles into frustration. He thinks to himself how 6 months of effort have been rendered completely and utterly useless. He finds himself standing before a door labeled Blue Dungeon. He had been so focused on the mana index measurement that he'd forgotten this was his original destination. Deciding he might as well enter since he's already here, he looks up into a vast, domed atrium where shimmering particles drift down from the glass ceiling like snow. As he steps inside, a cheerful staff member welcomes him, announcing that this is the entrance to the Blue Dungeon and advising entrants to be well prepared. Yuma is initially dismissive, thinking it can't be much more than a slightly larger version of the hole in his yard, but then his eyes widen in shock. The sight that greets him is a colossal, circular abyss plunging into darkness, ringed by a high walkway where other people appear as tiny figures. He cautiously steps onto a bridge spanning the chasm, awestruck by the scale. He murmurs in disbelief, wondering how a dungeon could possibly be so massive. The staff member from the entrance approaches, asking if it's his first time. After he confirms, she requests to see his admission pass. She checks it and notes he's cleared for the first floor, reassuring him it isn't dangerous. She then asks if he brought a weapon to defeat monsters, catching him completely off guard. He admits that he didn't bring anything. He recalls seeing a shop selling stun guns and batons near where he bought his mana meter, but he didn't get one. The staff member acknowledges this and tells him she has a solution. In response, she gestures to a counter labeled Monster Subjugation Weapon Rental. She explains that he can borrow any weapon he likes, but he must fill out a form with his personal details and remember to return on his way out. Understanding, he agrees. He decided against the specialized rental weapons, instead choosing a simple hammer. Having used one for so long, he felt it was the tool that would fit him best. With his chosen tool in hand, he began the long walk down a wide, gently sloping staircase carved into the dungeon's rock. He mused that taking the elevator might have been a better idea. The descent finally ended at a modern doorway labeled First Floor. He paused before it, his expression hardening with resolve as he prepared to enter the dungeon proper. Stepping through, he was immediately dwarfed by the sheer, cavernous scale of the interior. The stone walls stretched up into an unseen ceiling high above. The first floor was a vast, ruined cityscape contained within the earth, its ancient structures crumbling under the weight of time. As his eyes adjusted, he found it interesting that despite being so far underground, a faint light filtered down from somewhere above, though it wasn't nearly bright enough to illuminate the entire space. His attention was then drawn to the level below, which was surprisingly crowded. The area was bustling with so many people it felt more like a tourist attraction. He observed that everyone was exploring in groups, actively hunting for monsters. A feeling of isolation washed over him as he realized he was the only one there by himself. Seeing another party defeat a creature, he began to worry if any monsters were even left for him to fight. Just then, a soft plopping sound echoed on the stone tiles. A small, gelatinous creature had appeared directly in his path. He raised his hammer, his expression grim. He thought it was his bad luck to get such a simple-looking monster, especially compared to the incredibly fast one he'd seen in his yard. Still, this was his chance. He prepared to strike. He brings the hammer down with a decisive thwack, the slime bursting into a harmless splatter of goo. The ease of the kill leaves him dumbfounded. He wonders aloud how slimes can be so weak, realizing the one in his garden was 100 times stronger. The hope that this would raise his mana vanishes, and he collapses in despair, lamenting that his 6 months of hard work feel utterly wasted. A check of his status confirms it. His mana index remains at 0. Despite his frustration, he continues hunting. After finding and defeating 6 more slimes, not a single one has dropped an item. He sighs, resigning himself to his bad luck. While he kneels in disappointment, a cheerful shout rings out nearby. A small girl has found something, excitedly yelling that she got a blue magic stone. She proudly displays the glittering gem. An unseen companion notes that it's a Sokyu no aquamarine of about 0.2 carats, estimating its value at around 2,000 yen if sold. The girl, however, has no intention of selling it. She declares that she wants to use magic and will keep the stone for herself. When reminded that magic only works inside the dungeon, she happily agrees, finding it perfectly fine. Her simple, earnest wish makes Yuma pause. He wonders if his own way of thinking is as basic as a child's. He watches silently as the girl and her guardian walk away. He looks back at his status report, the glaring 0 mocking him. A grim thought crosses his mind. Is he even less capable than that little girl? The reality that he can't use magic, no matter how many slimes he defeats, begins to sink in. Meanwhile, at the modern facility of the International Dungeon Research Organization, the IDR, Ethan Noble spots his assistant, Clark. Calling out to him, Ethan asks him to deliver a report. Clark agrees, but hesitates, asking why Ethan doesn't just deliver it himself. He begins by apologizing to his assistant, Clark, for sharing the information, describing himself as an eccentric. He admits that he finds it difficult to deal with Ethan, and that it will be up to Clark to judge whether the situation is interesting, leaving the young man flustered. Continuing his unusual explanation, he refers to himself in the third person, noting that Ethan was the brilliant scholar who first discovered mana and whose power will be necessary to handle the current crisis. He then formally entrusts a report to Clark, asking him to review it. As Clark begins to read, his expression shifts to one of shock. He can only mutter in disbelief as Ethan calmly confirms that the data within the report is, indeed, correct. The assistant voices his alarm, stating that this will become a massive problem. Ethan explains the core issue. Mana is leaking from the dungeon to the surface. A chart shows its concentration steadily increasing over time. He reminds Clark that the only reason monsters are confined to the dungeons is the very absence of mana in the outside world. The unspoken but inevitable conclusion hangs in the air. If the mana continues to leak, it is only a matter of time before monsters emerge from the dungeon and walk upon the surface. This realization causes Clark to panic, nervously biting the corner of the folder. Ethan, however, tells him there is no need to worry just yet, a statement that catches his anxious assistant completely off guard. He elaborates on his reasoning, explaining that the rate of mana concentration increase is still minimal. Therefore, any monsters that might appear would be weak creatures from the lower floors, posing no immediate, widespread threat. Clark concedes the point. Ethan advises that losing one's composure only narrows their perspective. Since the problem is not immediate, they should use the time to calmly formulate countermeasures. Though Clark feels more settled, Ethan directs his attention back to the report. He points out that the mana concentration on the lower floors is also rising, which means that eventually, even powerful monsters from the deep floors will be able to ascend. He then challenges his assistant, asking if he still thinks they shouldn't be panicking. As Clark stands frozen by this new, terrifying implication, Ethan calmly stirs a drink. He states that, more importantly, there's another, more pressing problem to consider. His assistant can only ask in disbelief. There's more? He explains the dire implication of mana leaking outside the dungeons. With a sharp look, he clarifies that it means magic will become usable on the surface. As this new reality spreads across the world, the concept itself seems to find its way into Cookie Midamura's room, a dark wisp of potential snaking through his open window under the night sky. He sits at his desk, staring intently at a small, dark object resting before him. He wonders what to do with it. He picks it up, his reflection captured in its dark surface. This is the magic or a drop item he has spent the entire summer vacation, 100 days straight, tirelessly defeating metal slimes to obtain. Despite the uncertainty, an irrepressible curiosity takes hold. He decides that, as a memento if nothing else, he absolutely must try to use it. His enthusiasm is tempered by research. He learns that if the magic or contains even a little mana, he won't be able to use it. His own mana measurement was 0, and while some ores are known to have no mana, he can't be sure. The most worrying thought, however, is the consequence of failure. If it's unusable, the ore might simply pass through his system, a possibility that he finds deeply unsettling. He understands the risk. He notes that a normal object of this size is about 3 to 4 centimeters. A new resolve hardens his expression. If a 2-centimeter iron lump can pass from his rear, then he'll find a way to deal with this no matter what. With his mind made up, he heads to the kitchen, grabbing a drink from the refrigerator and a bottle of disinfectant spray from the counter. He sprays the small, dark, or before bringing it to his open mouth, ready to consume it. After swallowing the ore, he takes a long drink from his bottle and waits. A moment passes. He feels nothing. He wonders if it had any effect at all. He gasps as a sudden, intense warmth erupts from his stomach, a sensation that radiates through his body. His eyes widen in shock and anticipation. The warmth convinces him that something is finally happening. He wonders with excitement if he has successfully absorbed the magic ore. He recalls that the ore was meant to enhance physical abilities, and though the change was said to be minuscule, he entertains the possibility that it might unlock some incredible, hidden power within him. Eager to test this potential new strength, he begins throwing a flurry of punches and kicks into the air, shouting for his awesome power to manifest. After his enthusiastic display yields no results, his shoulders slump in disappointment. He concludes that nothing has changed at all. He then rationalizes that magic probably doesn't work outside of dungeon anyway, deciding to be satisfied for the moment with simply having consumed the item. His moment of quiet resignation is shattered as Mamizu suddenly barks, startling him and causing him to cry out in surprise. He tries to placate the agitated Mamizu, explaining that he was only testing for any changes from the ore. He tells the creature to calm down and save its barking for when a slime appears and its belly is full. His attention is suddenly drawn downwards. A faint, hexagonal pattern materializes on his cheek as he stares intently at his own hand, which has begun to transform. He holds up his hands, now completely altered. They are dark and monstrous, with long, slender fingers tapering into sharp, menacing claws. He can only stare, a silent question hanging in his mind. Cookie Midamura bursts into his room, his mother's voice calling after him from downstairs. She asks what he's doing, noting that their pet, Mamizu, is still barking. He ignores her, staring at his own body in shock and crying out, "What is this? What the heck is this?" He stumbles to a mirror, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stares at his reflection. His skin has taken on an unnatural, metallic sheen. The horrifying realization dawns on him. Turning into metal, he thinks, his face a mask of pure shock. He touches his face, wondering if this is the power of the magic ore he found. Collapsing onto his desk chair, his mind races. He questions if this is a magic that turns his entire body to metal, even his tongue. He thought magic only worked inside dungeons, but now he's forced to consider if there are types that work outside, or if this is even magic at all. The uncertainty sends a wave of panic through him. He clutches his head, his eyes wide with terror, as he wonders, will this body ever turn back to normal? His panic intensifies. No, no, no. Change back, he pleads internally. The thought of being stuck like this forever is unbearable. His appearance is simply too strange. But despite his desperation, nothing changes. Defeated, he slumps to the floor, moaning that it's hopeless. He blames the metal slime, lamenting that his new appearance makes him look just like one. He stares at his gleaming, metallic hand in despair. An idea sparks. He decides to test his new body. First, he strikes his arm with a hammer. No pain, just as hard as a metal slime. Then he brings the flame of a portable gas burner to his hand and yelps, "It's hot." He quickly touches a cold can and flinches, "It's cold." This gives him a crucial insight. Holding the burner and the can, he connects the dots. His weakness to fire and cold is exactly the same as a metal slime's. A thoughtful expression replaces his panic. He leaped into the air, a wave of relief washing over him as his body returned to normal. He shouted in triumph, realizing the transformation had only lasted about 5 minutes. The effect wore off on its own. His initial excitement, however, soon gave way to a flicker of disappointment. He looked out over the city lights, wondering if that was it, a one-time experience. It had been surprisingly interesting after all. The following day, he was determined to try again. Standing on a balcony, he focused his will, repeatedly commanding his body to harden. After several failed attempts, the metallic sheen finally spread across his arm. He had done it again. He continued his experiments indoors, marveling that a magic or had granted him an ability despite his supposed 0 mana index. Just as before, the transformation automatically deactivated after 5 minutes. He immediately tried to harden again, but nothing happened. The realization dawned on him. This power could only be used once per day. Despite the limitation, his mind raced with possibilities. He imagined himself deep within a dungeon, his body hardened like steel. He could be a great success, smashing through powerful monsters with a single metallic punch. The thought of success brought other ideas to mind. He recalled the streamer he had watched, holding a magic stone worth 3 million yen. A sly grin spread across his face as he realized he could do the same, even if he wasn't particularly interested in the fame. His thoughts drifted back to that very streamer, whose video explained the dangers of the deeper dungeon levels. The man in the sunglasses stated that the monsters there have incredibly tough bodies, making them nearly impervious to physical attacks, even from firearms and artillery. He went on to describe the creatures: dragons that breathe fire, monstrous birds that conjure gales, spirits that command cold, and demons wreathed in lightning. These deep-level monsters were a menagerie of horrors that could wield magic themselves, which is precisely why adventurers with magical abilities were so highly prized. The video's explanation brought Cookie back to a harsh reality. He looked out over the city, the excitement draining from him as he realized his power was ultimately useless. And so, as he stood before his school, he was left with the same thought. He had an extraordinary ability to harden his body, but absolutely no practical way to use it. He periodically found himself worrying about the future, but it always ended with him just lazing about. He would look on with envy at the rich and famous, yet take no action himself. With no real ambitions, he had resigned himself to applying to a low-ranking F-rank university. This apathy extended to his daily life, where he complained about the tedious chore of hunting metal slimes. This chore became a morning ritual. With his small companion, Mamizu, watching, he would locate a slime and, with a practiced heave, bring his hammer down upon it. In this unchanging, listless routine, more than a year passed since he first encountered a metal slime. His days continued to drift by. Far from his mundane existence, within the dark, cavernous depths of a dungeon, a different kind of reality unfolded. This was the Ibaraki Red Dungeon. Inside, a woman in a business suit stumbled, her face etched with fear. Her companions fled in terror, one of them screaming for anyone to help, shouting that they were in grave danger. The source of their panic was a colossal, armored beast. The dragon-like creature stomped forward, its sheer size shaking the cavern. It let out a deafening roar, its jaw glowing with nascent energy as it prepared to unleash a devastating attack. But before it could, a figure descended from above. A young woman in a dark uniform, her light-colored hair flowing behind her, drew a sword as she dove towards the monster's back. With a flash of steel, she plunged her blade into the creature's armored neck, the impact echoing through the cave. She stands her ground as the massive dragon's armored head cracks and splinters from the force of her previous strike. Seizing the opening, she leaps high above the beast, her blade gleaming as she drives it down for the finishing blow. After the creature falls, she turns to the grateful explorers. One asks if she's all right. She confirms that she is fine, explaining that the fire-resistant cloak she borrowed for the trial session protected her. As they offer to check her vitals and ask for her name, she presents an ID card, introducing herself as Amazoru, a third-year high school student. Elsewhere, in a modern high-rise office, a young man with similar light-colored hair sits waiting. He turns as someone enters, remarking that they've kept him waiting. The man who entered, a stern figure in a dark suit, introduces himself as Ishikawa of the L-Sheed Company, the one responsible for the dungeon trial. He formally thanks the young man for saving one of his employees, to which the young man replies that he's just glad everyone is safe. Ishikawa's demeanor remains serious as he gets to the purpose of their meeting. He gestures to a report on his desk detailing the salamander the young man defeated, noting that its vital spots, the neck and under the foreleg, were struck with precision. He asks directly if it was a calculated attack. The young man, Amazawa, confirms that it was. He explains that he has been researching dungeon monsters, and if it's a creature he has studied, he has memorized the locations of its vital points. Impressed, Ishikawa acknowledges him as a true prodigy. His expression then hardens slightly as he gives a curt order not to interfere, simply stating that he understands. The young man can only respond with a confused "huh." Before he can question the strange command, a case is presented, revealing a large, sparkling red gemstone inside. It is a vermilion silver ruby. Ishikawa explains that this is the magic stone dropped by the salamander, and that the young man has the right to claim it. He reveals its staggering value, a mana index of 700, with a market price of 14 million yen. Stunned, Amazour insists he cannot accept such a valuable item, but Ishikawa counters, pointing out that the trial's contract explicitly states that any magic stones from defeated monsters belong to the one who defeated them. In what seems to be a memory or a pivotal past moment, the young swordswoman, Amazour, presents a small box. With a serious expression, she explains that her intuition tells her the ruby inside is essential for the recipient's future, urging them to accept it. Meanwhile, on the morning of December 12th, Cookie Midamura groggily starts his day, complaining about school while drinking from a milk carton. He glances at the television, dismissing the celebrity gossip and wishing aloud for some dungeon-related news instead. His wish is immediately granted as the broadcast cuts to a special report. The news details a major incident during a dungeon trial hosted by the large corporation, Elshid. A salamander, a creature that normally inhabits the 10th floor or deeper, had appeared on a lower level. As he listens, Cookie muses on how strong a monster from below the 10th floor must be. The report continues, revealing that the person who rescued a woman attacked during the chaos was, surprisingly, a current high school student. The screen then shows a picture of the hero in question, the swordswoman from a dungeon. A news ticker identifies her as Amaz 17. Seeing the image and the name, Cookie's eyes fly open in shock and recognition. He stares, stunned, as a single name escapes his lips in a whisper of disbelief. The scene abruptly shifts to a media frenzy outside a school building. A swarm of reporters surrounds Usuo, thrusting microphones and cameras toward her. She remains composed amidst the chaos. When a reporter asks if she was afraid of the monster, Usuo replies with a calm smile that at the time, she was completely focused and acting on instinct. Another journalist points out that even Elshid's own explorers were shocked that a high schooler defeated such a powerful beast. She humbly deflects the compliment, stating it was only possible because she had a rented dungeon weapon. The questioning turns to the spoils. A reporter mentions the dropped magic stone is worth over 14 million yen and asks if she plans to sell it. From the crowd, Cookie is visibly staggered by the amount. Usuo simply says she intends to use it herself, causing Cookie to silently exclaim in disbelief at her decision to forego the fortune. His thoughts drift to the press conference, where the young man identified as Amazour confidently declared his future ambition, to become a seeker. During that event, a company representative had praised Amazour's excellent grades and strong desire to serve the public, noting that the Elshid company had already recognized his talent. Overhearing this, Cookie, completely lost, had turned to Ichino's Kid for an explanation. She clarified that Elshid is Japan's largest dungeon enterprise and Rue's #1 choice. Usuo, exasperated, had then interjected, scolding Cookie for his ignorance. She explained that to join the company, Rue intends to enter a National Searcher Training Institution, or SDI, after graduating. When Cookie remained clueless, she added with frustration that it was his own fault for dismissing anything he wasn't immediately interested in. At that moment, Kid had turned to him with a serious expression, revealing that she also had something to confess. She declared her intention to join Rue at the SDI after their graduation. Her declaration hung in the air. Usuo's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She internally acknowledged the difficulty of becoming a seeker, but a new resolve hardened her expression. This was the dream she had finally found, and she was determined to pursue it. She then explained to a stunned Cookie that after consulting with Rue, she took an aptitude test with Elshid and was told she had potential. More importantly, she revealed her ultimate goal, to become a messiah, a special profession only available to those who can use recovery magic with a white magic stone. The weight of their ambitions leaves Cookie standing alone, separated from the crowd. The words future and dream echo in his mind, feeling distant and foreign. His mind flashes back to their shared childhood, a time when he viewed Rue as a rival and assumed he and Kid would always be together. Now, he sees them both striding purposefully towards their own dreams. In comparison, he is standing still, left behind on a path with no destination. The realization crashes down on him. Panic sets in as he questions what he should do. He has nothing he wants to pursue, no passions, no interests. A desperate thought screams through his mind. He has to do something, anything. At his desk, surrounded by textbooks, Cookie Midamura confronts a difficult truth, the vast difference in academic ability between himself and his friends, Rue and Kid. He resolves that to catch up, he must begin studying immediately. Moments later, he turns to his small companion, Mamizu, and whimsically asks where his motivation switch might be, before slumping over, feeling it's a hopeless endeavor. His thoughts drift as he sits with Mamizu, lamenting his own lack of a dream or purpose. He feels aimless and adrift, unsure of what to do or which direction to run, a feeling that saps his motivation. His mind then conjures an image of his childhood friend, Amazour, a 17-year-old who seems to have it all, Top grades, athletic prowess, good looks, and immense popularity. A news clipping flashes through his mind, noting that Amazon recently became famous for defeating a salamander in the Red Dungeon, and that his future ambition is to become an explorer. He then thinks of his other childhood friend, Ichino's Kid. He reflects that while she often teases him and can be meddlesome, she is a genuinely good person, though he's been thrown off by how much more feminine she has become lately. Raised in a single-parent home, her dream has always been to help people. She once spoke of nursing school, but has now set her sights on becoming a savior, a profession that utilizes recovery magic. Yuma concludes that both of his friends are aiming for incredible goals, and he has no doubt they will succeed. This line of thought brings a sharp pang of envy. An image of the confident dungeon channel streamer flashes in his mind, a symbol of the specially chosen and recognized individuals whose status he can't help but resent. As he watches the figures of Rue and Kid run ahead toward their goals, a realization dawns on him. The reason they seem so dazzling, the reason he feels such envy, is simply because he himself has not yet found anything to strive for. He looks down at Mamizu, a quiet longing in his eyes. He, too, wishes he had something he could pursue with such passion. Putting aside his thoughts for now, he focuses on the task at hand. He enters a dungeon, deciding to stick to his daily routine. He has managed to get 2 more magic stones to drop from the local monsters. After consuming the 2 stones, he clenches his fist. The duration of his metallization effect has now been extended to 15 minutes. Still, he sighs, acknowledging that the skill remains as useless as ever. He stands at the mouth of a cave, resigned. He muses that even with the extended effect time, the slimes he defeats are always the same. Nothing ever changes. Suddenly, a shimmering, golden creature hops into view. It's a golden metal slime. Yuma stares, utterly shocked by the unexpected sight, stammering for it to wait as the rare creature seems poised to flee. He scrambles to fight the creature, realizing his usual tools, a spray can and a portable burner, are less effective against this one. This is different from all the metal slimes he has faced before. A special battle has finally arrived. After a desperate struggle, he emerges victorious. Panting from exhaustion, he notes how much of his burner fuel and spray he had to use to finally bring it down. His exhaustion gives way to curiosity as he spots what the creature left behind. He picks up a glittering, faceted gem, identifying it as a magic stone, but one with a brilliant golden hue. Back in his room, he attempts to research his find. He searches for information on a golden magic stone from the Black Dungeon, but his search yields no results. He then tries a different approach, placing the stone near his mana index measuring device, but the reading remains at 0. He wonders if this magic stone-like object has any value at all, even if he can't use it himself. Deciding to see if it has monetary worth, he calls a precious metals dealer to ask about getting it appraised. The conversation quickly hits a wall. The dealer asks for a purity stamp, proof of purchase, or a certificate, none of which exists for a monster drop. To make matters worse, he's reminded that as a miner, he can't sell it by himself anyway. Frustrated by the dead end, he considers another possibility, using it himself. He briefly imagines it turning his whole body to gold before dismissing the silly thought. He then tries to channel its power, commanding himself to harden, but nothing happens. He concludes it's just a normal piece of metal, showing no unusual properties. The days pass. He continues his routine, and something changes. One day, a magic stone drops. The next day, another. And the day after that, yet another. Crouching in the familiar gloom of the dungeon, he reflects on this strange new pattern. For over a year of hunting metal slimes daily, he had only ever found a total of 3 magic stones. Yet now, they've been dropping for 5 consecutive days. As another, larger magic stone materializes before him, a sudden realization strikes. What if the golden stone has an effect that causes other magic stones to drop? The thought ignites a spark of hope. Perhaps his year-long, arduous battle is finally about to be rewarded. He decided to put his theory to the test. Hopping on his bicycle, he set off for the Blue Dungeon, determined to see if his newfound luck applied to ordinary slimes. His initial tests, however, yielded no results from special monsters. But his luck with regular ones held. Magic stones continued to drop daily, and he soon acquired his 14th. He realized that consuming them had extended the duration of his metallization skill to 70 minutes, though he still saw little practical use for the ability. It was just as he was lamenting this fact that a new, unexpected creature emerged from the shadows. Before him squatted a creature unlike the others, a glistening, deep red slime. He stared in disbelief, realizing that after encountering a golden variant, he was now face-to-face with a crimson one. His shock quickly turned to exasperation. He couldn't believe there were so many different types of slimes. This one, however, seemed particularly belligerent, immediately lunging toward him. In response, he activated his metallization skill. A realization struck him. This was the purpose of his ability. He had been worried about his increasingly muscular form tearing his clothes, but against an aggressive foe, it was the perfect defense. He threw a powerful punch, only to find it had no effect whatsoever. The crimson slime remained completely unfazed. He quickly switched tactics, pulling out his portable gas burner, but wondered if a red slime might be immune to flames. His suspicion was confirmed as the fire washed over the creature, leaving it entirely unharmed. Frustrated and out of options, he retreated to research on his phone. He needed to find a way to make metal brittle. His search yielded a promising result. An article explaining that certain acidic detergents could cause red rust to form on metal, weakening its structure. This seemed like a viable solution. With a plan in mind, he began his preparations. First, he would need to ensure Mamizu was safely out of the way. Then, for his own safety, he would equip a mask and rubber gloves. Finally, he gathered a bucket and the key ingredient, a bottle of acidic detergent. Fully prepared, he confronted the crimson slime once more. Crouching low, he sprayed the creature with the acidic solution. The plan was to induce rust and then apply rapid temperature changes to finish it off. He flashed a quick peace sign, confident in his new strategy. His victory was short-lived. The very next day, he encountered yet another variant, a shimmering blue slime. He groaned in frustration, quickly discovering this one was immune to cold. Undeterred, he devised a new plan using kerosene and fire. His ingenuity paid off, and he emerged victorious once again. The following day, he encountered another slime. He had anticipated its presence, but this one's color was subtly different, making it hard to distinguish from the golden variant. Since both fire and cold had proven effective before, he dispatched it with similar ease. Upon its defeat, the creature dissolved, leaving behind a small pile of sparkling, colored magic stones. He picked one up, noting that the golden slime seemed to have a 100% drop rate for these. Since color magic stones were impossible to sell, he figured he might as well consume it and see what happened. Back in his room, he decided to investigate the effects. He lifted his shirt, preparing to test his metallization skill, but first took care to remove his clothes so they wouldn't be destroyed by the transformation. He flexed to activate the ability, but his eyes shot open in shock as unfamiliar, dark, crystalline structures began to erupt from his skin. Staring at his reflection, he was aghast. His body was now encased in a dark, segmented armor, and horns protruded from his head. He could only stammer in disbelief, realizing something had physically grown from him. His panic mounted. This was completely different from before, far beyond a simple reinforcement of his skill. He forced himself to calm down, remembering he could just deactivate the metallization. His purpose had been to test the magic stone's effect, and as he wondered what to look for, an idea struck him. He recalled information he'd found online. White or transparent magic stones from white dungeons grant recovery magic. Red stones from red dungeons grant fire magic, and blue stones from blue dungeons grant water magic. A new theory began to form. He wondered if colored magic stones possessed the same elemental attributes as the dungeons they originated from. He didn't feel he could cast magic in the traditional sense, but he sensed something else was now possible. Focusing his will, a small flame ignited in his armored palm. He stared at the fire, a new power now his to command. He stood, contemplating the new possibilities. If the red stone granted him fire resistance, then it stood to reason that stones from other dungeons would grant corresponding abilities. A blue stone might offer water resistance, yellow for lightning, and green for wind. He had no way to test the theory at the moment, but the logic seemed sound. The realization struck him. This was an incredible development. It meant he could potentially acquire resistances to all four major elements. Yet, even as he grasped the significance of this power, a familiar sense of aimlessness returned. No matter how strong his metallic body became, or what resistances he gained, it did nothing for his everyday life, nor did it give him the dream or goal he still lacked. After 5 minutes, the transformation subsided, and he was relieved to find himself back to normal. Despite his earlier introspection, he couldn't deny the happiness of gaining new abilities. Lying in bed, he considered the pattern of colors he'd encountered: red, blue, yellow, green. He wondered if white would be next, perhaps granting resistance to healing magic, though he wasn't sure what that would entail. Regardless, the thought of encountering new types of slimes filled him with a little excitement. The following day, he ventured into a dungeon. As he stood at the entrance of cavern, his flashlight beam fell upon an unexpected sight: a colossal, jet-black slime creature blocking his path. His face contorted with shock and disbelief. It was enormous and black. The sheer absurdity of its size left him momentarily speechless, his mind scrambling to process the sight. The narrative shifts back slightly in time, to the day after Yuma defeated the golden slime, 2 weeks prior. At the International Dungeon Organization headquarters, Ethan Noble remarks to his assistant, Clark Griffin, that he had heard the commotion from other researchers and surmised what had happened. He confirms the defeat of a Duke-class monster, noting this as the third such event on record, following 2 other Dukes and 1 Monarch. Ethan adds that since it has been 3 years since any unique monster was defeated, the current excitement is understandable. The source of this classification system is the Orpheus tablet, a stone slab discovered within the Orpheus White Dungeon. This tablet displays the hierarchy of special monsters, with embedded jewels representing 6 kings, 12 monarchs, and 24 dukes. These creatures are known among researchers as monsters with peculiar properties. When one is defeated, its corresponding jewel on the tablet shatters, making the artifact of critical importance to governments and dungeon research organizations worldwide. Based on this system, Clark reports that governments across the globe are confirming the defeat of the Duke. He speculates that it must have been a formidable group of explorers. Ethan considers that the kill took place in a black dungeon and lists potential locations like India, Russia, Australia, or Brazil. He briefly considers Japan, but dismisses the idea, noting that exploration in its black dungeon is not very advanced. A smirk plays on his lips as he reflects on the situation. He finds it peculiar that someone would venture so deep into a black dungeon, a type known for not being profitable. Back in the present, the very person who prompted this speculation, Yuma, stares in disbelief at a colossal black slime. He thinks to himself that there must be some real fanatics in the world, completely unaware that he is the subject of the IDR's interest. The creature before him is immense, its body a mass of black ooze with two glowing, crescent-shaped eyes. He had been expecting a large slime, perhaps 75 centimeters wide like a balance ball, a significant step up from the usual 15-centimeter metal slimes. But the reality is far more terrifying. The creature is so massive that Yuma feels a brief moment of relief, thinking it's too big to exit its cavernous hole. The thought is immediately replaced by dread. It is simply too big. His mind races, questioning if he can possibly defeat such a monstrosity. But he refuses to give up. The dream of acquiring a rare magic stone fuels his resolve. If he can defeat a slime of this magnitude, surely the reward would be extraordinary. Steeling himself, Yuma lays out his equipment, gas canisters and spray cans. He reminds himself that he has his enhanced metallized ability to rely on. In a moment of panic, he realizes he forgot to remove his outer clothes, but dismisses it. It's too late now, he has to go. As he crouches, ready to act, the ground beneath the slime suddenly cracks and erupts. Caught completely by surprise, Yuma can only shout in confusion, wondering what is happening. From the depths of the massive black form, a simple kitchen knife is violently expelled, embedding itself in the cavern floor. In the aftermath, the creature's gelatinous body begins to ripple and melt, spreading across the ground like a dark, viscous liquid. The creature's dissolving form coalesces once more, lashing out with a newly formed, blade-like appendage. The strike connects, but Yuma is unharmed, not even feeling pain. He realizes with a start that his metal-hardened body is tougher than the slime's weaponized tentacle. Despite his resilience, the slime relentlessly pummels him with a flurry of strikes. He yells in frustration for it to stop, shouting that its attacks are completely ineffective. In response, the creature's body shifts once more, its smooth surface bristling with sharp spikes. Its new form grates against him. He shouts in annoyance, noting that while he's unharmed, his clothes are being torn to shreds. The realization solidifies his confidence. The giant slime cannot penetrate his metal-hardened body. He grins, declaring that with his spray and burner still available, he can definitely win this fight. The grueling battle of attrition continues. 30 minutes pass, then an entire hour, with the slime relentlessly attacking. Yuma grits his teeth, refusing to be defeated. He finally crouches amidst a litter of empty spray cans, exhausted. The slime, too, seems to have lost its vigor. Yuma addresses the creature directly, asking if it's had enough and suggesting they call it quits. He considers his options. While the creature's attacks are ineffective, he admits to himself that being pummeled constantly is unpleasant. With both his spray and burner now completely used up, he's unsure of his next move. His gaze then lands on his nail hammer. He thinks about how he's used it daily for over a year, how it has become more than a tool, an extension of his own body. A fresh wave of fury washes over him. Gripping the familiar handle, he roars at the slime, declaring that he's had enough and that it's time for it to break. With a final, furious shout, he lunges forward, bringing the hammer down in a devastating blow. The impact shatters the ground as he strikes the creature's body with immense force. The exertion leaves him utterly spent. He collapses against the cavern wall, muttering about how tired he is. Where the slime once was, only a puddle remains, and a single, ornate, jewel-like emblem falls into it. He returns home, his clothes in tatters, only to be immediately confronted by an exasperated Usura. She demands to know what happened to him. He casually explains that he and Mamizu were just playing a bit too hard, resulting in his shredded attire. Later, sitting at his desk, he examines the emblem dropped by the slime. He observes that at a glance, it resembles an ordinary magic stone, save for an intricate, flower-like pattern. He laments that if it contained even a small amount of mana, he could either sell it or use it himself. A thought crosses his mind. After defeating such a powerful monster, surely his own mana reserves must have increased, even if just by a little. He places the pattern magic stone next to a device, presumably to measure its mana content. The display flashes 00. He sighs in disappointment, frustrated that he can neither use nor sell the stone, which makes accepting the outcome difficult. His gaze then falls upon a bottle containing a liquid, likely a drop from the defeated monster. Deciding it would be a waste not to use it, and spurred by curiosity, he resolves to drink it. As he does, a familiar warmth spreads through his stomach, a sensation he notes he has grown quite accustomed to. The sensation abruptly intensifies sending a shocking jolt through his entire body. An unprecedented, searing heat courses through him, far more intense than anything he has experienced. A moment of panic sets in as he wonders if he made a terrible mistake. He speculates if this new feeling will cause a different change, perhaps making his form even spikier. Just as quickly as it began, the sensation fades, leaving him startled but relieved. Before he can fully recover, his body begins to transform. He groans, realizing he's made the same mistake again, forgetting to remove his clothes before activating his metallization. He knows another shirt is about to be destroyed. The black, liquid-like substance erupts violently outward from his form. From within the chaotic splatter, a new figure begins to coalesce, a sleek, fully armored form. The transformation completes, revealing a tall, imposing armored figure. From within this new body, he expresses his shock. He marvels at its appearance, noting its strength and how it resembles a villain from a Sentai series. He's taken aback by his new height, his line of sight now significantly higher than before. He stared at his newly transformed hand, recalling the blade-like tentacles from before. He wondered why he couldn't manifest them now, a flicker of disappointment crossing his mind. Then a realization struck him. His body changed just by imagining it. The thought was incredible, fascinating. He pushed the idea further, and his arm morphed, first into a heavy hammer and then into a sharp sword. As his experimentation continued, a black, gelatinous appendage oozed from his body, startling his small companion, Mamizu. Yuma called out to his pet, excitedly showing off his new creation. Afterward, catching his reflection in a glass door, a chilling thought had surfaced. His form was completely monstrous. He felt a deep sense of fear, but for the moment, he chose to ignore that inner voice. At the very same time Yuma was battling the giant slime, events were set in motion elsewhere. At the headquarters of the International Dungeon Organization, a critical assembly was being called. Inside a secure conference room, an emergency meeting of the chief researchers had begun, with Ethan Noble presiding over the gathering of concerned officials. Ethan addressed the room, acknowledging that they were all aware of the unprecedented situation. He directed their attention to a display, explaining that the matter concerned an anomaly with the Orpheus' tablets that had occurred for 4 consecutive days. The chairperson, Maya Berger of Israel, spoke up. She reminded them that the Black Duke was defeated just 2 weeks ago, an event that hadn't happened in 3 years. In light of that, she found it unbelievable that 4 monarchs could be toppled in such quick succession. The tension in the room rose. Li Haoran, a biologist from China, defensively asked if he was being accused of a cover-up by his nation. In response, James Bright, a physicist from America, declared that the real issue was the complete lack of information, angrily questioning if some country was conducting a massive, unreported exploration. Cutting through the accusations, Ahmad Tahir, an archaeologist from Egypt, offered a calmer analysis. He noted that the red, blue, yellow, and green ores breaking on alternating days meant that 4 dungeons were conquered almost simultaneously. He then posed the crucial question, why would anyone do such a thing? The debate within the International Dungeon Organization grows heated. James Bright dismisses the current events, arguing that only America or China would possess enough explorers for such a feat. Li Haoran scoffs, calling America's affection for dungeons childish. Cutting through the argument, Ethan Noble raises a gloved hand, stating that to enter 4 dungeons and reach their deepest floors simultaneously would require a significant number of explorers. He reminds them of the facts. A monarch previously discovered in America was only defeated by a team of 15 explorers, which included the world's strongest, Albert. Even with such power, 7 of them were sacrificed in the effort. Therefore, facing 4 monarchs near the 100th floor at the same time should be impossible. This apparent impossibility leads Ethan to a critical question. He asks why, if their premise of a large-scale, multinational attack is wrong, the tablets shattered it all. James Bright, taken aback, demands an explanation, but Ethan simply closes his eyes in thought. He gestures towards the display of the Orpheus' tablets. He explains their prior assumption. The regularly arranged colored gems corresponded to the dungeons where monarchs had been defeated. The red, blue, and green gems from the recent incident align with this theory. However, he points out a discrepancy, questioning why the dungeon associated with the now-shattered black gem is different from the others. The chairperson, Maya Berger, interjects, confirming that the dungeon in question is indeed managed and that a new report has just arrived. She then prompts Ethan to share his hypothesis. In response, Ethan turns back to James. He concedes that James's point might be correct, but it raises another question. Where is this supposed explorer who can reach the 100th floor alone? Ethan suggests it is more logical to assume the existence of an unknown explorer. He then reveals that the black gem shattered 2 weeks prior, indicating the black dungeon was under attack then. James's expression shifts to one of concern as he realizes the black dungeon is an unresearched territory, wondering who could have possibly gained entry. Meanwhile, far from the meeting, Yuma sits quietly with Mamizu. He reflects that while it's only a hypothesis, it's the only explanation for how he defeated 4 monarchs. He wonders if he is now something beyond even the world's strongest explorer group. In the background, Clark Griffin rushes towards the meeting hall, shouting about an emergency contact. Back in the council room, Ethan's confidence is palpable as he declares his hypothesis must be correct. He explains that powerful explorers are typically managed by their country or military. He theorizes that one such individual defeated the newly born Duke of the Black Dungeon and then proceeded to subjugate the monarchs of the deeper floors one after another. His theory is punctuated by a stark visual from the tablets. Alongside the defeated king of the Six Horns, the gem representing the Black King is also shown to have been vanquished. Cookie Mitamura considers his dwindling supplies. He reflects that he used up his entire stock of burner fuel and cooling spray to defeat the giant slime, leaving him with nothing for the regular metal slimes. He worries about what to do, knowing a new variant could appear at any time. Nearby, his pet Mamazu watches him intently. Cookie then turns to the creature, noting its unusually good mood and offering it breakfast. He muses that for over a year, Mamazu has been sensing the slimes every morning and barking until they were dealt with. Stepping outside into the cold morning air with Mamazu, he suddenly stops. A flicker of confusion crosses his face as he senses something is amiss in his yard. He approaches the spot where the hole always appeared. It's gone. The ground is perfectly level. Crouching down, he stares in disbelief, wondering if defeating the giant slime was the cause. He questions if that creature was some kind of boss, marveling that the pit, which had reappeared no matter how many times he filled it, could vanish so suddenly. The realization washes over him, bringing a profound sense of relief. He feels refreshed, glad that he no longer has to wake up early and that Mamazu is free from the strange pest. As he walks to school, he appreciates that the disappearance of the hole means he can finally have leisurely mornings and eat breakfast in peace. Yet, as he walks, the relief fades into a strange melancholy. He reflects on the consequences. His allowance will no longer be spent on odd supplies, his clothes won't get ruined, and it's not as if anyone would have recognized his efforts anyway. Despite having wished for this outcome, a feeling of loneliness and emptiness begins to settle in. His somber thoughts are interrupted by a cheerful greeting. It's Usawa Rei. Cookie, startled, greets her back, mistakenly calling her Keed. She smiles, simply noting that he's early today. She continues, mentioning that she wasn't worried about him, as he's been waking up early for a while. Internally, however, her mind flashes back to the previous day. She pieces it together, realizing he must have been late because it took him so long to defeat the giant slime, though she dismisses the thought, assuming he just overslept. Hearing her words, Cookie's expression hardens with resolve. He states firmly that being late because of the dungeon is something that will never happen again. He vows it with finality, leaving Rei looking at him with a puzzled expression. Later, back in his room, Cookie sits at his desk. The morning's events weigh on him, and the strange sense of jishsa, of loneliness, lingers. His eyes land on a document, a university acceptance letter. He thinks about how he was just pushed into it by those around him, how he simply submitted the papers and passed. A campus life awaits him in the spring, yet his posture and vacant expression suggest a deep lack of enthusiasm for this predetermined future. He lay on his bed, the weight of his own apathy pressing down on him. He reflected on how he'd never had anything he truly wanted to be, no dreams to speak of. He had always put on a brave face, but he found this version of himself pathetic, and the realization made him feel even worse. But then, a new resolve flickered within him. Sitting at his desk, he looked at his phone, realizing its search history was now filled with terms from a world he had only recently discovered. It was all about dungeons. His thoughts drifted back to the small dungeon that had appeared in his yard. For a full year, he had fought there every single day. He admitted to himself that his initial motivations might not have been pure, but he had still given it his all. That perseverance forged a new reality. Where once he would have scoffed at such an unrealistic dream, he could now say it with conviction. He finally understood what he wanted, to become an explorer. With this newfound purpose, his research became focused. He found the institution that Rei had mentioned, the Searcher Training Institution, or SDI. Established 2 years prior, the semi-public organization was Japan's first to succeed in capturing a monster and now develops artificial dungeons. It recruits new talent twice a year, but the curriculum is demanding. Students face expulsion if they fail the bi-monthly exams. He acknowledged how strict the program was. He recalled a self-promotional exercise from class, deciding to list his own strengths. The first was obvious, metallization. He then considered his resistances to fire, lightning, water, and wind, realizing he was nearly invincible on the defensive. He also thought about the offensive applications, transforming his body into weapons, a feat he had never witnessed from any other explorer. He pictured the transformation, his body dissolving into a metallic gel before reforming into a hardened, armored state. The liquid form, he mused, will be perfect for infiltrating tight spaces. His gaze fell upon a small slime contained in a jar on his desk, prompting a new line of thought. What were his weaknesses? The thought struck him with the force of a physical blow. His metallization ability was an undeniable product of the Black Dungeon. If anyone found out, it would be proof that he had been entering it illegally. Panic set in as he realized he had been breaking the law this whole time and must never let it be discovered. A quick search confirmed his fears. The regulations surrounding the Black Dungeon were far stricter than any other, and the penalties were severe. He returned to his list of problems. The second weakness was his complete lack of magical ability. His mana index remained at 0. This led to the third, and perhaps largest, problem. Individuals are forbidden from entering the lower levels of dungeons. To become a true professional explorer, he would have to join a government-sanctioned organization. He rested his head in his hand, a wave of exhaustion washing over him. He understood now, but it felt a little late to be having these realizations after his university exams were already finished. He sat at his desk, a thought striking him as he recalled a recent conversation. Keat had been talking about studying for her exams, and it suddenly occurred to him that the SDI entrance exam hadn't happened yet. A small part of him felt a flicker of opportunity. The next day at school, Usawa Rei scanned the hallway of a different class building, noting how unusual it was for Yuma to be there. Spotting him, she called out, asking him to wait. As he turned, Cookie didn't hesitate. He bowed deeply before stunned Rei, confessing that he had a favor to ask. With desperation in his voice, he pleaded with her to teach him how to study. Rei was completely flabbergasted. She couldn't believe it, thinking to herself that in 18 years of being childhood friends, he had never said anything like this. She asked what brought on this change of heart, reminding him that he had already been accepted into university. He confirmed that was true, but his expression remained troubled. Dropping to his knees, Cookie apologized profusely. Rei crossed her arms, stating that it was fine as long as he knew he was being difficult, but she questioned the suddenness of it all. She demanded to know if he was truly serious about the SDI, especially after he had dismissed the idea of being savior. His gaze was firm and unwavering. He declared that he was serious. After giving a lot of thought, he was genuinely interested and wanted to give it his all. Seeing his determination, Rei began to reconsider, wondering if she had been too quick to dismiss him. Her expression softened, and she knelt to face him. She told him there was no such thing as being too late to try, but the time until the exam was short. She explained that the SDI's entrance exam prioritizes the aptitude test over the written one. Therefore, she reasoned, if he worked incredibly hard on the written portion, his chances wouldn't be 0. A teasing smile bloomed on Rei's face. She added that, of course, if he started crying and complaining, his chances would indeed be 0. She playfully challenged him, asking what he was going to do. With a determined shout, Rei declared she would help him, warning that from that day forward, her tutoring would be Spartan. A montage of intense study sessions began, showing Cookie struggling under piles of books as Rei coached him. Time flew by, until only 3 days remained before the test. On the day of the exam, they stood before the SDI's Tokyo Setagaya main campus. Rei reminded Cookie that the exam hall for the savior candidates was in the second building, while his was in the fourth. They looked at each other, wished each other luck, and prepared to part ways. He stands with Rei, his expression tense. He insists he won't say anything more until he passes the exam, vowing to keep silent. Rei teases him, remarking that he's been stubborn like this since he was a child, to which he retorts for her to be quiet. After finishing the written portion of the exam, he walks through the facility corridors. He reflects that the test went better than he'd thought, a testament to Keed's special training. His relief quickly evaporates as he remembers the next phase, the practical skills test, the main event. He grows anxious, realizing he couldn't find any information about it, and even Keed wasn't familiar with the details. He's completely unprepared and wonders what's about to happen. A confident voice from a young woman beside him cuts through his thoughts. She calmly explains that they will have to defeat a monster kept here, and then their mana ascension rate will be confirmed. She continues, identifying the creature as a red slime from the red dungeon. She notes that it's the perfect choice for the test, because defeating one makes it easy to measure the increase in mana. Cookie is impressed by her detailed knowledge, while she seems amused by his apparent closeness to Rei. The young woman introduces herself as Kagurazaka and states she's 18. Cookie replies that he is Mitaka, a third-year high schooler. He feels a sense of relief, pleased to finally meet someone his own age after being surrounded by older examinees during the written test. At the testing station, an examiner confirms both he and Kagurazaka have a mana index of 0. Kagurazaka dismisses this, explaining that the starting number isn't important. What matters is the potential for growth. She elaborates that for an explorer, mana is everything. It's required for stronger, longer-lasting magic, and mana-fortified barriers can repel even bullets. An explorer's true strength, she concludes, is the sheer amount of mana they possess. Kagurazaka's lecture continues. She explains that the amount of mana gained from defeating the same monster varies by person. This is the mana ascension rate. However, there is a mana cap, a limit beyond which one's mana cannot grow. A low cap makes becoming an explorer difficult. An examiner then provides them with knives, instructing them to stab a red slime to measure this rate. Cookie finally understands the test's purpose. The weight of the situation crashes down on him, and his face contorts with anxiety. He frets over what he'll do if his mana doesn't increase at all. Kagurazaka, sensing his panic, tells him not to worry, reassuring him that he can still pass even with a low score. Her words offer little comfort. Standing alone, Cookie considers that aptitude is an individual trait, unique to each person. The seed of doubt remains firmly planted in his mind. He clutched his head, forcing the panic down. He reminded himself that for over a year, he had been defeating metal slimes. That had to count as some kind of aptitude. Steeling his resolve, he decided he would not give in to weakness. He would give it his all. As he found his footing, an examiner began to brief the assembled candidates on the practical portion of the test. The examiner's voice cut through the murmurs of the hall. He issued a stern warning to the group, stating that there was a genuine risk of injury during the upcoming test and that they must pay close attention. He then elaborated on the location. The practical exam, he explained, would be held in a unique facility just ahead, the only one of its kind in all of Japan, an artificial dungeon. An examiner in a lab coat addresses the group of participants, gesturing towards a large, sealed door. He explains that beyond it lies the artificial dungeon's first basement floor. This facility is an experimental area designed to replicate a dungeon's mana-rich environment for research on magic and monsters. The test itself, he states, is simple. They must retrieve a ball from a box at the end of a passage within the time limit. However, he adds a crucial warning. Monsters have been released inside, and the participants must avoid them to proceed. Hearing this, the crowd of examinees, including Yuma, Rei, and Kagurazuka, begins to murmur. They question the parameters of the test, wondering aloud if they're only meant to evade, what the rules are regarding attacks, and if weapons are permitted. The examiner clarifies that the most important quality being evaluated is speed, as courage is the most necessary trait for an explorer. He states that no matter how talented or well-equipped one is, it's meaningless without bravery. Therefore, bringing weapons and attacking the monsters are strictly forbidden. Their performance will be judged solely on the time it takes to complete the task. He then reveals the monster they will face, a red slime, the same type used for mana measurement. He cautions that while not life-threatening, they should still be careful. With the explanation complete, he announces the test will begin in order of examination number. While waiting, Kagurazuka leans toward Yuma with a confident smirk. She points out that she was right about the monster being a red slime and declares that this will be an easy victory. Yuma simply acknowledges her correct prediction. His calm demeanor shatters in an instant. Yuma's eyes widen in shock as he stares intently at the dungeon entrance, a sudden realization dawning on him. He senses an immense presence from within, wondering what could possibly be inside. Kagurazuka notices his abrupt change, questioning his sudden seriousness. The source of his premonition is revealed, a veritable army of red slimes, a horde so dense it's said to silence a crying child. The sheer scale of the infestation is staggering. An unbelievable number of the creatures pack the corridor from wall to wall. Despite the sight, the first examinee charges forward with a yell, only to be immediately swarmed and engulfed by the tide of slimes. His advance is completely halted. Watching from the observation area, Kagurazuka stands in disbelief, shouting that the sheer quantity is nothing short of harassment. From a control booth, the female examiner announces his fate. Disqualified. The timer shows he lasted only 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Kagurazuka grits her teeth, a vein of frustration pulsing on her temple. An examiner's voice cuts through the tension, calling for the next participant to enter. Inside the dungeon entrance, the sea of red slimes squirms, awaiting its next challenger. Inside the test chamber, the previously frenzied red slimes suddenly fall silent. A wave of confusion ripples through the horde as the entrance door slides open once more. Watching another examinee approach the starting line, Yuma feels a knot of tension tighten in his stomach, wondering what truly awaits them. Kagurazuka, still pale from her own attempt, warns him that some participants flee screaming while others freeze and require rescue. As the examiner signals the start, Yuma questions if he can possibly overcome such a challenge. His eyes widen in surprise. Instead of a swarming mass, the red slimes are clustered together in a dense, unmoving pile at the far end of the corridor. The other examinee hesitates, baffled by the clear path, before cautiously proceeding. Yuma watches, bewildered, as the boy walks straight through the corridor completely unmolested. He continues to stare at the passive creatures. They aren't attacking. He wonders why, noticing that they seem to lack their earlier energy. Then it clicks. He realizes the timing was perfect. The slimes had exhausted themselves dealing with a large number of previous examinees, especially after Kagurazuka's run. They were simply too tired to attack. The examiner announces his time, 2 minutes and 8 seconds. Kagurazuka exclaims that his performance was amazing. Flustered, Yuma insists it was just good luck that he went after her. Rei, standing nearby, looks on with a questioning expression. With the test concluded, the participants begin to file out. Kagurazuka gives Yuma a wave, wishing him luck on passing. He returns the gesture, a sense of relief washing over him. Having done all he could, Yuma knows all that's left is to wait for the results. He pulls out his phone to see a message from Keed, who is heading home and asking how the test went. He replies with a simple thumbs up. 1 week later, standing outside his home, Yuma holds an envelope in his trembling hands. His face is a mask of pure anxiety as he prepares to learn his fate. He erupts in celebration, the word passed, exploding from him as confetti flies. He and Mamizu jump for joy until his mother appears, asking about the commotion. He quickly apologizes for the noise. After the initial excitement, his expression turns serious. He knows it's a given that his parents expect him to attend university, and he realizes he must explain himself properly to gain their acceptance. He turns to his mother, informing her that he needs to speak with both of them together once his father returns home. Later, facing his parents, he makes his declaration. He will not be going to university in spring. Instead, he has decided to enroll in the National Explorer Training Organization. His mother is stunned, asking what an Explorer Training Organization even is, her mind flashing to an image of her son's usual lazy demeanor. He explains that it's a specialized academy for becoming an explorer, and that without graduating, one cannot get a job in any dungeon-related company. She presses him, asking why he never mentioned this desire before. The situation escalates when he reveals he has already taken and passed the exam. His parents are shocked, demanding to know why he didn't consult them. Yuma admits his mistake, acknowledging he should have talked to them first. His father, a serious man with glasses, points out that this isn't a career for the half-hearted. Yuma confirms his resolve and explains the program's harsh terms. It's a free, 6-month boarding school, but bi-monthly exams determine if a student is expelled. He acknowledges the immense danger, recalling how even a minor battle left his clothes in tatters, proving the job is far from safe. His father then asks why he can't pursue this after graduating from university. Flustered, Yuma explains that he had no real passion for university and was only going by default. Now that he has found something he truly wants to do, he feels he can't focus on anything else. He shrinks under their scrutiny, certain his mother's glare is silently judging his lack of past commitment. He assumes his father finds his reasoning naive and desperately wonders how he can possibly convince them. But his father's response is unexpected. He admits he was a little surprised, but clarifies that it's because he had never before heard the core of his son's own will, his thoughts, his passions, and what he truly wants. His father looks at him thoughtfully, a small smile playing on his lips. He muses aloud that he hadn't realized Yuma was interested in such things. Yuma looks back, a wave of relief washing over his face. He thinks to himself that he's glad his father finally knows. Continuing the conversation, his father lays out a plan. He tells Yuma that if he wants to pursue this, he should. However, instead of dropping out university, he should take a formal leave of absence. If he graduates from the training academy and proves he can make it as an explorer, then he can submit his withdrawal papers. Yuma is stunned into silence by the proposal. Overcome with joy, he leaps to his feet, tears welling in his eyes. He thanks his father profusely and promises with all his heart that he will do his best. As Yuma dashes out, his father shouts a booming cheer of encouragement. His mother, still seated, seems bewildered. She asks her husband if this is really all right, wondering if it wouldn't be better for him to just go to university. Her husband simply states that it doesn't matter. From his father's perspective, Yuma is already running down the path he has chosen for himself. He reasons that there's no point in trying to stop him now. The best thing they can do is send him off with their full support so he can run as hard as possible. Time passes. On April 1st, at the entrance ceremony for the Explorer Training Organization, STI, Yuma stands proudly in a new suit. He waves energetically to Usuwa Rei and Amazuru, calling out that they're late, though his own excitement is palpable. Walking together, Usuwa Rei remarks that she had no idea Yuma was interested in becoming an explorer, mentioning that she found out from Kid, who had been studying the topic. Amazuru playfully adds that Yuma can accomplish things when he puts his mind to it. Usuwa Rei's face lights up with a bright smile. She exclaims how wonderful it is that the three of them are together again. Amazuru returns her smile warmly. Yeah, you're right, he agrees. He walks alongside Yuma and Usuwa Rei beneath the blossoming trees of the academy grounds. Yuma feels a sense of accomplishment, realizing he can finally stand beside his friends. He resolves to work hard alongside Rue and Kid. Usuwa Rei mentions that their class assignments for the day will be decided by their entrance exam scores. As the students gather for the announcements, both Amazuru and Usuwa Rei are placed together in the prestigious Group 1. They exchange confident glances, unsurprised by their high placement. Yuma, however, finds himself separated from them. A sign designates his placement in Group 3, a result that leaves him visibly stunned and confused. A horrifying realization dawns on Yuma Mitaka. He asks if the SDI class placements are based on entrance exam scores. If so, that means he and the others in Group 3 are considered failures before they've even begun. His new group mates begin to introduce themselves. A man with glasses states he is Hamanaka, age 23. Another, a boisterous man with a headband, introduces himself as Ryosuke Mashiya, age 30, noting he's the oldest student there. Ryosuke cheerfully declares that as fellow dropouts in Group 3, they should all get along. He then turns to Yuma, remarking on his youth. Yuma confirms that he is 18 years old. The friendly atmosphere does little to soothe him. He spirals, thinking of Rue and Kid diligently studying and working towards their dreams while he used to laze about, complaining that the world was unfair. The difference between them, he now realizes, is stark. Meanwhile, Hamanaka continues the conversation, mentioning a rumor that 2 students in Group 1 achieve the highest mana up rate in history. he posits that one must be Kagurazaka Shion, the daughter of the famous dungeon-related corporation, Kagurazaka Pharmaceuticals. The name gives Yuma a jolt. He adds that the other record breaker was a high schooler who made the news for saving someone in the Red Dungeon, identifying him as Rue. Yuma is stunned. He reflects that Rue not only possesses talent, but also works tirelessly, making the gap between them seem insurmountable. Hamanaka then shares another rumor, that within their own group 3, there is a student whose mana uprate was 0. Yuma freezes in horror as a memory of his own results flashes before his eyes, displaying a stark 0%. The realization dawns on Hamanaka. He asks if Yuma is the one with the 0 rate, noting that red slimes are supposed to be perfect for measuring the stat. As Yuma flinches in embarrassment, Hamanaka eagerly asks to see his results. He desperately tries to hide the paper, thinking back on how he never expected a score of 0 after performing well on the written and practical exams. Hamanaka gets a look anyway and expresses shock, stating that it's amazing Yuma even passed, as anyone else would have been failed instantly. Before Hamanaka can say more, Ryosuke grabs him in a headlock, telling him not to make Yuma feel worse. He points out that their own scores are also incredibly low. Hamanaka's at 0.19 and his own at 0.23. In the end, he declares they're not so different from Yuma after all. He listens as his new teammate, Ryosuke Mashiya, offers a different perspective. Mashiya tells him not to give up so soon, suggesting that while his growth may be slow, it could be a sign that his ultimate mana limit is exceptionally high. Mashiya continues his encouragement, explaining that even with a delayed start, all that matters is eventually crossing the finish line. The logic seems to strike a chord with Yuma, who can only stammer in understanding. Galvanized by this new outlook, the trio, Yuma, Mashiya, and Hamanaka, rally together. Mashiya declares them all to be late bloomers, proclaiming that their true challenge has only just begun. Their newfound resolve leads them to observe a combat training session that utilizes artificially bred slimes. From that point on, the 3 dedicate themselves completely. They engage in intense study of dungeon-related laws and social conditions. And on their days off, they venture into the Blue Dungeon for practical monster hunting experience. During one of these sessions, Amazawa approaches Yuma, noting his placement in Group 3. He offers Yuma the chance to use an artificial dungeon for extra, independent training. A nearby staff member remarks on their enthusiasm, and Yuma readily accepts the offer. He is filled with a fierce determination. He realizes his scores are the lowest of the 3 and that he must catch up. Clinging to the hope of being a late bloomer, he resolves to pour all his effort into one goal, making his mana index grow. Despite all his efforts, the results are devastating. While Mashiya and Hamanaka show significant gains, with mana indices of 41.23 and 35.62 respectively, Yuma's remains unchanged at a stark 0.00. The weight of the result settles on the group. Mashiya grimly notes that Yuma is still at 0, sarcastically questioning if it's a talent in itself before revealing the dire situation. If they fail to raise their mana index to 50 by the midterm exam, they will be expelled. This pressure is not unique to them. The poor rate of mana index growth is a widespread issue within Group 3, and an increasing number of their classmates are beginning to show signs of despair. He stood resolute, a grim understanding dawning on him. This was a world where both effort and talent were required to succeed. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from Keed, asking how he was and encouraging him to keep trying his best. Looking out over the city, his resolve hardened. He had to somehow pass the midterm exams. He had to graduate from SDI alongside Rue and Keed. Meanwhile, at the International Dungeon Research Organization, Ethan Noble sat listening to a report. He asked his assistant, Clark Griffin, if there was any new information. Clark confirmed that even after a worldwide search, they had found nothing concerning the Black King. He noticed his assistant's unease and offered a slight reassurance, stating that he didn't suspect the stone slab was the issue. Clark seemed taken aback by the comment. Clark urged his superior not to show such open disdain before continuing with his duties. He informed Ethan that a request had arrived, asking him to compile a report of his opinions regarding artificial dungeons. The topic clearly irritated Ethan. His annoyance quickly morphed into a sly grin. He declared that it was wrong to meddle with such things, a statement that seemed to bewilder Clark. Ethan then explained his position. He was fundamentally opposed to artificial dungeons and the research conducted within them. With related accidents occurring worldwide, he argued that failing to find the root cause would lead to a far more dire situation. He considered the attempt to artificially replicate dungeons, about which so much is still unknown, to be an act of hubris, warning that overconfidence in science often leads to painful consequences. 2 months later, in June, the students of SDI gathered for a joint class mock training exercise in dungeon exploration. As Yuma stood with Usuo Rei, Rue approached them with a casual greeting, noting that their objective for the day was to reach the 3rd basement floor of the artificial dungeon. Kagurazaka Shion then joined them, remarking that 15 students had been selected from Class 1 for the exercise. She pointed out that Usuo Rei's selection was a given and then wondered about the other members, including herself and Keed. Usuo Rei confirmed Keed's participation, explaining that with two savior candidates present, it would be the duty of the aspiring seekers to protect them. She explains to Yuma the plan for the training exercise. They're to navigate to the third floor using a map, retrieve a magic stone, and return. Usawa Rei adds that this is simpler than a real dungeon, where the terrain and path are often unknown. As they speak, another student, Amazurue, presents his weapon, a magic enchanted sword, into which a magic stone has been embedded to channel mana for powerful spells. Usawa Rei asks if the rumor is true, that he incorporated the ruby of vermilion he owned. He confirms, stating he intends to test it today. Yuma looks on, stunned into silence. The gem in question is the ruby of vermilion, a treasure Amazurue acquired in the Red Dungeon during his high school days. It is an incredibly rare artifact, with a mana index of 700 and a value of 14 million yen. Amazawa-Rue's ability to casually use such an item implies his own mana index must be over 700. As Usawa Rei departs for the monitor room, Yuma watches them, feeling the immense power gap between them grow. He steels himself, realizing he has to work even harder. Meanwhile, deep in the SDI facility's research area on the 5th basement level, Ethan Noble walks with his assistant, Clark Griffin. Ethan notes that the student training is about to begin on the floors above. Clark asks if the noise will reach them, but Ethan assures him the facility is built to withstand far more. Their inspection leads them to a massive, centipede-like creature contained behind reinforced glass. Clark reports that the specimen, Adamus, is calm. Ethan then inquires about another creature, Persephone, which Clark says was agitated but has since settled. Ethan looks at the creature, remarking that even if it rampaged, the glass would hold, and that this itself is a problem. He then turns his attention to a large, veiny egg in a separate containment unit. Clark expresses doubt that it will ever hatch, but Ethan confirms that faint signs of life have been detected. When Clark voices concern over the danger of hatching, Ethan admits he doesn't know what kind of monster is inside. A nearby monitor displays the egg's steady heartbeat. Ethan explains it was found on the 36th floor of the Green Dungeon. He reasons that since it's not from a very deep level, any creature born from it would be a juvenile and therefore manageable. Suddenly, the steady rhythm on the electrocardiogram erupts into a frantic, chaotic pattern. Both Ethan and Clark stare in alarm, questioning the abrupt change. An instant later, the monitor screen is shattered and splattered with a dark, viscous fluid. The frantic pulse has been replaced by a dead flatline. Something has hatched. In the aftermath of the violent hatching, dark, viscous fluid lies splattered across the pristine white floor of the laboratory, a sizzling sound hanging in the air. Far from the chaos below, in the SDI monitor room, an instructor stands at a podium addressing a crowd of students. He announces that they are about to observe a mock training exercise featuring the elite selection team. The instructor continues, explaining that a dungeon is an inherently dangerous place. Success, he stresses, requires not just defeating monsters, but returning safely. He delivers a stark warning. Some of them may be forced to withdraw after the upcoming midterm exams, and they should learn from the severity of the training they are about to witness. On the monitors, the training exercise is already underway. Amazurue and Usawa Rei move with explosive speed, their attacks a blur of motion as they engage unseen targets within the dungeon. Back in the monitor room, Yuma watches the display with a confident smirk, his arms crossed. The screens show the overwhelming power of the two elite students. Hamanaka remarks that while he'd heard they were amazing, Amazawa and Kagurazaka are on another level, true monsters. Mashiya elaborates, explaining that magic enchanted armaments require a specific aptitude that not everyone possesses, and that both Amazawa and Kagurazaka have an incredibly high aptitude for them. Yuma reflects on the one-sided display. For someone like Amazurue, this training must be almost effortless. His thoughts are interrupted by a sudden, piercing sound that fills the room, causing him to flinch in confusion. An alarm blares through the monitor room. A synthesized voice declares an emergency and reports that a problem has occurred. The students, including a startled Yuma and Mashiya, look around in alarm. The voice repeats its instruction to follow the teacher's directions and evacuate, leaving Yuma to wonder what could have happened. The instructor shouts for everyone to remain calm and begin evacuating in an orderly fashion, starting with the front rows. Yuma glances back at the monitors, wondering if the elite team can hear the alarm. On the screen, Amazurue and Usawa Rei seem unaware, their situation unclear. Deep within the dungeon, Amazurue and Usawa Rei stand back to back, alert and ready. They have paused their training, sensing that something is amiss. As the alarms continued to blare, he watched the monitor room screens, his expression unchanged. Deep within the dungeon, the structure began to give way. Ichino's Keed's face was a mask of terror as debris rained down, while nearby, Usawa Rei stood with an unnerving calm amidst the chaos. The sight on the screen struck Cookie Mitamura with the force of a physical blow. His eyes widened in horror as he watched the devastation unfold, his gaze fixed on Usawa Rei, standing impassively as the dungeon crumbled around her. He bolted from his spot, pushing past the others in the monitor room. Ryosuke Mashiya shouted after him, his voice echoing the group's confusion. "Hey, where are you going? Mitaka, come back." But their calls were lost on him. A single, frantic thought consumed his mind. He had seen the face of a falling student for an instant, and he was certain he couldn't be mistaken. Clenching his fist, a name tore from his throat in a desperate shout. Keyed, unseen by him. The image of Usuo Rei on the monitor now bore a faint, knowing smile. Sudden chaos erupts as Ichino's keyed plummets from a walkway. Hey, this is bad. Ichino's fell. Amazuwa Rue shouts, realizing the blaring warning sounds must be connected to an incident below. He quickly takes charge, telling the others he will go down to help while they evacuate. Usuo Rei starts to object, wanting to join, but Kagurazuka, shy and cuts her off, urging everyone to remain calm and assess the situation. His expression is firm and resolute. He tells them not to worry, reasoning that it would be faster for him to go on his own. Kagurazuka, however, steps forward, addressing Usuwa. She points out the vast difference in skill between Amazuwa and the rest of them, then declares that if ability is the deciding factor, she will go. She instructs the others to evacuate quickly and inform the security explorers that they've gone down. Usuwa reluctantly agrees, wishing them both to be careful. Amazuwa thanks her, adding that helping a classmate is the right thing to do. As they face the dark chasm, he offers to illuminate their path with his magic, while Kagurazuka braces to leap down. After landing among the debris on the lower level, they find no trace of Ichino's. She's not here, Amazawa murmurs. Crouching low, Kagurazuka questions how she could be gone if she just fell. Her eyes then fix on the ground. Look, a blood trail. Amazawa's face darkens as he processes the discovery. He realizes she couldn't have just walked away. She was injured and dragged off by something. Elsewhere, a frantic voice echoes down a dark, metallic corridor. Keyed's in danger. We have to hurry. Meanwhile, at a dungeon entrance, Yuma wonders how he can sneak past the guards, anxious about a friend who went inside. Suddenly, a hand clamps down on his shoulder. It's Mashiya, demanding to know what he is doing there. An SDI instructor immediately steps in, addressing Yuma with stern authority. He states that the official rescue teams will handle the students inside the dungeon. He commands Yuma to follow instructions and evacuate to a designated safe area. His expression hardens into one of defiance. He counters that the security explorers won't prioritize the search for them. With resolve burning in his eyes, he declares that he can't leave it to them. He has to go himself. He stands firm in his defiance, his mind racing to find a way into the dungeon without being noticed. His eyes fall upon equipment carts being wheeled nearby, and an idea begins to form. He wonders if that's the equipment being brought into the dungeon. Realizing this is his chance, he thinks that if he can hide within the equipment, he can get inside. Seizing the opportunity, he quickly slips into one of the large, empty containers on a rolling cart. Meanwhile, deep within the dungeon, a dark, viscous liquid begins to coalesce, rapidly taking the form of a monstrous, insectoid creature. The creature demonstrates a horrifying ability, liquefying its body to seep into a bag where Ichino's Keyed is being held captive. The captor celebrates their success, while far away, Yuma's determined voice echoes in thought, promising he is on his way to save her. Elsewhere, Amazuwa and Kagurazuka arrive in the research area on the 5th basement floor of the SDI artificial dungeon. They are met with a scene of absolute carnage, the walls and floors splattered with blood and littered with bodies. Kagurazuka stares in horror, whispering, "What is this?" As they process the devastation, Amazuwa kneels to examine the scene more closely. He grimly reports that everyone is dead and points out that the reinforced glass of a containment unit has been completely shattered. The monster that was inside, he notes, is gone. Suddenly, Kagurazuka gasps. A massive, multi-limbed arthropod monster lunges down from the darkened ceiling above, having escaped its enclosure. She realizes with dread that a monster is loose. The creature crashes down as Amazawa shouts a desperate plea for help. Simultaneously, the bag holding Keyed is ripped open from within. The dark mantis creature emerges with a sickening tear, towering over a fallen staff member as screams of terror fill the air. Standing at its full, terrifying height, the mantis creature surveys the carnage it has created, its scythe-like arms dripping with blood. In the background, Kagurazuka lies motionless on the floor. The creature stands before the shattered remains of its prison, a sign on the wall identifying the location. SDI Setagaya, HQ Research Area. High-risk creature observation lab. The insectoid creature stands over the fallen Kagurazuka, its bladed limbs poised. Beside it, its monstrous arthropod companion surveys the wreckage of the corridor, its many eyes glowing. Elsewhere, in another part of the facility, 2 staff members move equipment. One directs the other to carry a large bag, explaining that it contains enchanted armaments. The second man grunts at the unexpected weight, complaining that his shoulder feels like it might pop, but his colleague retorts that the other machinery is far heavier. The burdened man offers a quiet apology. He has no idea that the bag's weight is due to the person hidden inside. Concealed within, Yuma knows he is the cause of the man's struggle. He wonders where Keyed could be, realizing he cannot risk peeking out while being transported. As he's carried along, a voice crackles over a nearby radio. The transmission reports that everyone is safe, except for one person who fell to the 4th basement level through a collapsed floor. Yuma listens intently as the voice adds that 2 others went down to help, meaning a total of 3 people are now below. The staff members continue down a corridor, one telling the other they should evacuate upwards and hurry to the 4th floor. Inside the bag, the pieces fall into place for Yuma. Key must be on that floor. The movers arrive at the SDI Artificial Dungeon's 4th basement level, wondering where the fallen student is, when one of them spots something ahead. Sensing his chance, Yuma frantically pulls at the bag's zipper, realizing with alarm that it's about to be opened from the outside. He scrambles out into the corridor of the 4th floor, now empty. He knows this is his chance to move while no one is watching, but a chill runs down his spine. He can feel the presence of monsters nearby. His fear is immediately validated. Peeking around a corner, he sees a staff member shouting for everyone to grab their weapons. Yuma's eyes widen in horror as he recognizes the creature, a soul mantis. He realizes it's a monster from the deep levels, questioning how a creature with a foreign designation is even here. Such a beast would require multiple high-level explorers to defeat. He resolves to focus on finding Keed and leave the fighting to the professionals. Before he can act, the soul mantis lunges. Its side-like arm flashes through the air, slicing into the 2 staff members who had unknowingly brought Yuma to the floor. Blood erupts from their bodies as they're cut down. The attack is devastatingly swift. Amidst the carnage, a wounded member of a rescue team slumps against a wall, desperately speaking into his communicator. He reports to his squad that they have encountered a monster on the 4th basement level, confirming its identity without a doubt. It is the deep-level monster, Soul Mantis. Elsewhere, Kagurazuka Cheyenne and Ichino's Keed stand victorious atop a pile of defeated insectoid monsters. Keed, looking weary, asks if she's tired. Kagurazuka scoffs at the idea. Surveying the carnage, Keed wonders aloud if they defeated around 100 creatures, but Kagurazuka curtly replies that she wasn't counting and has no desire to. As they run onward, Kagurazuka complains about the SDI research lab's singular focus on insect-type monsters, questioning why they gathered so many when the world is full of animal and reptile-like creatures. She grumbles that while it might have been easier to raise them all together, it was just disgusting, and wishes someone had pointed that out before they started. Their forward momentum comes to a sudden halt. Amazuruwe, running alongside them, stops dead, his eyes widening in disbelief and shock at what stands before them. He stares at the figure that has appeared in their path, a tall, horned woman with a veil obscuring her lower face. She emanates a powerful and dangerous aura, her hands held poised as she regards the explorers. Amazuwa recognizes the monstrous woman, recalling her from a lesson. He questions why she is here, identifying her as Arachnne, a vicious monster from the Green Dungeon. He desperately thinks that Keed might be just on the other side of this very passage. He knows this creature is a monster that manipulates steel threads capable of slicing through anything. He realizes that in their current state, they stand no chance of winning. Even so, the thought that Keed might be just ahead gives him pause, a flicker of determination in his eyes. Before they can react, Arachnne makes her move. With a simple, elegant gesture, she unleashes a web of razor-sharp threads that shoot through the air toward them. The threads effortlessly slice through the metal pipes and structural supports of the corridor, demonstrating their terrifying cutting power. The attack tears past Kagurazuka and Keed, who cry out in alarm. Realizing the immense power gap, Kagurazuka shouts that it's hopeless and they have to run immediately. As they turn to flee, Amazuwa grits his teeth in frustration. Their escape route is blocked by another large, spider-like monster. He knows they are no match for these foes, but his mind races, thinking they must find another route to save Keed. Below, Arachnne looks on, her trap sprung. The horned creature, Arachnne, sits atop her giant spider mount, looking around the industrial corridor with an air of annoyance. She complains aloud that the facility is like a maze, and she has no idea where to go. Unbeknownst to her, one of her threads has ensnared a small, dark, slime-like creature, binding it completely. The captive creature struggles, exclaiming in surprise at the sticky substance wrapped around it and wondering what this thread could be. In a ruined chamber, a small, dark, gelatinous creature quivers as it is repeatedly poked from above. The creature, seemingly helpless, notes that something is there. The prodding continues, causing the slime to cry out to stop. A wider view reveals the assailant, a massive, dark, armored figure that has seemingly just risen into view, looming over its target. Within the slime, a consciousness struggles. It is Yuma, who has used a body change ability to become liquid metal. He realizes his escape is being hampered because his clothes, which he stored inside his metallic form, are snagged. He has a sudden insight. If his clothes are the problem, then he can simply transform his entire body into a weapon. With a flash of inspiration recalling his old baseball bat, he morphs his liquid form into a sharp blade, successfully breaking free. Yuma emerges, now clad in his own distinct armored suit, the residual dark liquid dripping off him. Perched on his shoulder, a small spider monster complains aloud, revealing it too had been subjected to the poking. The grinning armored antagonist, however, pays him no mind. It declares its intent to save someone named Keed and vows to end the current battle immediately. Its target becomes clear. The figure lunges with incredible speed toward Arachnne, who is bound and helpless in a web of threads alongside her smaller spider companion. The armored figure becomes a blur, streaking through the air in a devastatingly fast assault, leaving trails of dark energy in its wake before landing in a poised stance. It now stands before the ensnared Arachnne. Looking down on its defeated opponent, the figure remarks with disappointment that she was not as strong as it had anticipated. The armored figure unleashes a final, cataclysmic burst of power. The attack explodes outward, shattering the threads and engulfing Arachnne in a blinding display of destructive force. The armored figure stands over the crumpled form of Arachnne, the ground around them shattered from the force of the previous attack. He declares the subjugation of the Spider-Woman complete. He then reflects on the situation. A mental image of a bespectacled expert clarifies that monsters in training dungeons don't drop magic stones. Realizing this, the armored figure concludes that searching for drops is a waste of time. He dismisses the training monsters as trivial and resolves to find the nest quickly. The corridor is silent and empty, bearing the scars of the recent conflict. Debris and cracks mark the floor and walls, evidence of the power that was just unleashed. The armored figure surveys the destruction, his sharp-toothed grin fixed as he observes that the entire area is riddled with holes. Suddenly, a new threat emerges from the shadows. A large, dark, multi-segmented arthropod creature with multiple eyes and sharp mandibles rears up, blocking the path forward. His attention shifts downward to a figure on the floor. It is Rei, injured and lying amongst the debris. The armored figure quietly utters her name, Rei. Seeing her threatened, a wave of protective fury washes over him. He turns to the arthropod monster, his jaw unhinging as he lets out a furious roar, demanding it get away from her. He lunges, his arm transformed into a long, sharp blade. The weapon meets the creature's scythe-like limb with a deafening clang, sending sparks flying through the air. The armored figure drives his blade forward with overwhelming force, pushing back against the monster's defenses. With a final, decisive slash, he cleaves the arthropod creature clean in two. Its bisected halves fall uselessly to the ground as dark fluid splatters across the floor. The armored figure stared down at Rei's unmoving body. Panic gripped him as his mind raced with the horrifying possibility that she might be dead. He knelt beside her, a wave of relief washing over him as he confirmed she was breathing. But his relief was short-lived as he considered her injuries. Moving her carelessly could be a grave mistake. As if in response to his thoughts, Rei stirred weakly, her brow furrowed in pain. He watched her begin to regain consciousness, a sense of dread replacing his relief. He lamented that she was waking up now, completely unaware of the monstrous form watching over her as his own consciousness began to fade. With a sharp gasp, Yuma's eyes snapped open. He was no longer in the dungeon, but lying somewhere soft. A dull groan escaped him before he called out a name in confusion. Keyed. His disoriented mind plunged into a dream, a fantastical scene straight out of a storybook. He saw a beautiful princess, the spitting image of Ichino's Keyed, lying in a grand castle chamber, a scenario he recognized from popular fantasy manga. In this dream, he was the valiant prince, standing over the princess. He told Princess Keyed that she was safe now that he had come to her rescue. But her eyes widened not with relief, but with sheer terror. The dream warped into a horrifying nightmare. He was no longer a prince, but the hulking, grinning armored monster, clutching the princess as she let out a blood-curdling scream. The terror of a nightmare ripped him back to reality. He bolted upright, shouting Keyed's name, frantically asking what happened and pleading with her to pull herself together. A final fragment of the transformation flashed through his mind, the moment just before he woke. As the armored creature, he had stared at his own monstrous hand, a terrible realization dawning. His form was that of a monster. Sorry, Keyed, he had thought, full of regret. He struggled against the grip of the massive, hooded creature holding him fast. In his monstrous armored form, Yuma realized with a jolt that his opponent was still alive. Let go, he roared, thrashing against the unyielding hold. As he fought to break free, a tremendous crash echoed from below. The colossal centipede monster, Adamus, plummeted through a newly formed chasm in the floor, landing near the still form of Rei. A scream pierced the air. The sound drew the attention of Kagurazaka Cheyenne and her companion. Peering down the long, damaged corridor, Kagurazaka spotted the unconscious girl. There is a sound over there, she said, urging her partner to investigate. Rushing to Rei's side, she quickly checked for signs of life. She's alive. She's okay. She lifted the unconscious Rei into her arms. All right, let's head back, Kagurazaka declared, her expression grim. She reasoned that the monster must have moved on, but they needed to proceed with caution. If we run into Arachnne again, she muttered, it's all over. They began their retreat down the precarious walkway. We don't have any weapons, and Kagurazaka has secured the route, her companion announced, taking the lead. Leave it to me. The path ahead was treacherous, the metal floor of the industrial corridor pockmarked with gaping holes, evidence of the recent battle's destructive force. A small piece of debris was tossed ahead, skittering across the ground to test the stability of the path. Meanwhile, on the floor above, the armored Yuma peered down into the darkness. This is the 5th floor, he wondered aloud. He noted the racket the centipede bastard was making below. His thoughts, however, were on the girl he was trying to protect. We have to get back to the 4th floor and help Keed, he resolved, his mind still confusing Usura Ray with his childhood friend. His resolve was cut short by a sudden, sharp sound from behind. He whipped around, startled, his senses on high alert. Before him stood a tall, insectoid warrior resembling a mantis, its scythe-like arms held ready. Looming behind it was the massive, multi-segmented body of the centipede creature, Adamus, which had apparently climbed back up. What are these things? Yuma thought, facing 2 powerful new threats. Inside the principal's office of the Explore Training Organization, SDI, an emergency meeting of all responsible parties is underway. An instructor reports what is currently known to the anxious principal of the Tokyo branch, Nanamura, who demands to know the current situation. The man explains that all the monsters being raised in the research lab have escaped and are now rampaging through the 4th and 5th floors. Worse, they have lost contact with the explorers sent to subdue the creatures, and 3 SDI students training in the artificial dungeon are missing. Principal Nanamura clenches his jaw, realizing the potential for this incident to escalate into a crisis for the SDI's very existence. He knows that if students are endangered, they will have no choice but to request aid from not only the government, but also the International Dungeon Association. The instructor continues, confirming that the Ministry of Defense and the police have been contacted. The L-Sheet Company is also dispatching a high-level explorer group, and the evacuation of nearby residents is underway. Hearing this, the principal asks for an assessment of the escaped monsters. He presents a tablet, explaining that 3 monsters are considered particularly dangerous. The first is Adamus, an isopod creature from the 50th floor of the Green Dungeon. Its body is covered in a hard carapace said to withstand a Patriot missile strike, making it highly resistant to both physical and magical attacks. Defeating it would be a challenge, even for top-tier explorers. In another location, the monstrous Adamus is pierced with surprising ease. A figure in dark, insectoid armor, having found the creature's shell unexpectedly soft, drives its bladed limb deep into the monster's body. The armored warrior effortlessly finishes off the giant pill bug and several smaller versions of it, completing the subjugation. Back in the office, unaware of these events, the instructor moves on. He introduces the second of the 3 dangerous monsters, a creature named Persephone. He displays an image of a massive, 3-headed centipede from the 60th floor of the Green Dungeon. When asked if it's more dangerous than Adamus, the instructor confirms that while its hard exoskeleton is also difficult to destroy, this monster has another threat. It spits a powerful poison when it feels endangered. The principal recoils, shocked by the mention of a poisonous liquid. His horror was justified. The briefing continued, detailing the extreme lethality of the creature's poison. A single drop of its venom making contact with skin would result in immediate death. Because of this, any form of close-quarters combat with a monster was considered a suicidal act. The only viable strategy for a group of explorers would be to use long-range magic to attack from a safe distance. He absorbed this grim assessment, knowing it would take time for the L-Sheet Explorer group to arrive. The principal could only wonder if the students would manage to stay alive until then. Meanwhile, the battle against the first monster, Adamus, had concluded. The grinning armored figure recoiled as the creature's fluids splattered its chassis, crying out in disgust at the filth. It seized the pillbug's head, admonishing the dying creature for drooling on it. With a grunt of annoyance, the figure gripped the head with both hands. "This is how you do it," it declared, beginning to crush the monster's exoskeleton. With a sickening crunch, the armored warrior obliterated the creature's head between its palms, sending a spray of gore across the corridor. Having dealt with Adamus, it turned its attention to the other escaped monster in the area, the Soul Mantis. "Prepare yourself," the figure commanded. "You're all that's left." The insectoid creature stood its ground, its large eyes glowing intently as it faced its powerful new adversary. Back in the office, Principal Nanamura pressed for the final piece of information. "And the third one? What kind of monster is it?" His assistant, Clark, delivered the grave news. "The third is Arachnne, the most dangerous monster that was in the Research Institute." He stared at the tablet, where an image of the monster Arachnne was displayed. The briefing continued, explaining that the creature possessed the upper body of a humanoid female and the lower body of a spider. It was a powerful monster, captured on the 86th floor of the Green Dungeon by an elite L-Sheet Explorer group. However, 2 of those top-tier explorers died during the engagement. The report specified that the threads produced by Arachnne could slice through anything, making it an even more problematic foe than the other 2. The revelation sent him into a rage. He slammed his hands on the desk, demanding to know why such a dangerous creature was brought there. The safety of human lives, he roared, should have been the absolute top priority. In response, Clark Griffin explained that the research was a direct request from the state. To formulate a strategy for conquering the dungeon, it was deemed necessary to study the monster's biology. He continued, adding that the facility was chosen for its high security level. Furthermore, since the Explorer Training Organization and the Underground Research Facility were part of a third sector enterprise, their command structures were separate, preventing him from interfering. Griffin bowed his head, offering a sincere apology. The principal could only slump back into his chair, a wave of powerlessness washing over him as he muttered a curse under his breath. As he stewed in his frustration, the SDI instructor spoke up, stating there was yet another problem. He reported that the rescue team sent into the artificial dungeon had gone silent, but not before mentioning something strange just as communication was lost. The principal's face contorted with dread. He reflected on his position. He was the principal, yes, but he was a businessman from the private sector, with no expertise in dungeons or monsters. He had heard about the Deep Zone monsters having regenerative abilities, but that was all. As he pondered, a communication feed showed a bloodied Cookie Midamura, confirming a monster encounter on the 4th basement level. The creature was identified as a Deep Zone monster, the Soul Mantis. This creature was one of the monsters that inhabit the deepest levels of a dungeon, a being that conventional weapons could not harm and that even dozens of high-level explorers struggled to contain. Clark Griffin then elaborated on the origin of these Deep Zone monsters. It was impossible to bring them to the research facility directly. However, a fossilized egg had been discovered in Fukuoka's Green Dungeon and was brought to the lab for study the previous month. He concluded that it must have been the egg of a Soul Mantis. The principal, looking at the image of Arachnne again, grimly processed the information, wondering if this meant the Soul Mantis was even stronger. The briefing data on the tablet corrected his assumption. The strength of the Soul Mantis was, in fact, incomparable to Arachne's. Its body was as tough as steel, and the sides extending from its 4 arms could bisect anything. Its movement speed was described as anything but ordinary. Furthermore, the creature could use wind magic. Its blades of wind could slice through the armor of a tank as if it were paper. On top of this, like other Deep Zone monsters, it possessed regenerative abilities, making it extremely difficult to defeat. The report concluded that it might be beyond the capabilities of the L-Sheed Company alone, and that a nationwide subjugation request to all of Japan's explorers might need to be considered. In his office, Principal Nanamura slumps in his chair, the weight of the briefing pressing down on him. He confesses to Clark Griffin that he cannot imagine any way for the situation to improve from this point. The thought concludes with a single, stark realization. It is impossible. His despairing thoughts drift outside the office walls, to the very facility now under threat. He questions how they could possibly bring such an unmanageable crisis under control. As the Soul Mantis unleashes a flurry of slashes, the grinning armored figure stands firm, feeling the impacts but seeing no damage. It wonders aloud what these strange movements are meant to accomplish. The sensation persists, confirming that something is indeed striking its body. A flicker of recognition crosses its mind. It feels as though it has encountered something like this before, somewhere. Suddenly, it all connects. The armored figure recalls the metal green slime and realizes that the green magic it absorbed granted it resistance to wind magic. It understands now that the Mantis's attacks are wind-based and that without this resistance, it would have been injured. Given its power and location on a lower floor, the figure deduces that the Soul Mantis must be the final boss of this artificial dungeon. It considers the other strange monsters it has faced, the spider, the giant pill bugs, the centipede, and realizes that defeating this final boss could be the key to gaining the mana index required for the midterm exams. Even with its low mana growth rate, defeating so many powerful creatures should provide a significant boost. A surge of motivation courses through the armored figure. It declares that it will defeat the Mantis, raise its mana, and then go to rescue Keed. As it stands resolute, the Soul Mantis continues its furious, desperate assault, its blades striking the unyielding armor with a series of sharp clangs. The Mantis lets out a piercing cry of pure frustration as its attacks shatter harmlessly against the figure's impenetrable defense. The two combatants pause, separated by a short distance. The armored figure remains completely unscathed, while the Soul Mantis visibly trembles, realizing its efforts are entirely futile. Despite this realization, the Soul Mantis launches another desperate flurry of attacks, its expression now one of visible distress. The armored figure muses that if it were fighting another SDI student, it would be having a grand time in a training exercise. But its unique nature as a human who can turn to metal changes things. Shaking off the thought, it addresses the Mantis, apologizing before stating that it's time to go and rescue Keed. The armored figure, having closed the distance, unleashes a flurry of blows against the Soul Mantis, declaring it a finishing attack. With the Mantis seemingly dispatched, the figure looks up through a hole in the ceiling, contemplating its path back to the 4th floor. However, the Mantis's solid body dissolves into a grotesque puddle of liquid, its form melting away across the floor. The liquid rapidly reforms, and the Soul Mantis stands again, fully regenerated. Nearby, a young man with glasses explains to Yuma that some monsters possess regenerative abilities. The armored figure observes this display, which the onlookers praise as worthy of a final boss. Yuma asks how such a creature can be defeated. His companion clarifies that one must either use magic to inhibit its regeneration or inflict damage so severe it cannot recover. The armored figure considers this, muttering that its own idea is a bit crude, but it will have to do. Putting its plan into action, the armored figure lunges forward and punches the soul mantis directly in its torso. With its arm embedded in the creature, the figure explains that since it can't use magic, this was the only method it could devise. It tells the mantis not to hold a grudge as its body begins to dissolve and flow into the armored arm. A brilliant flash of light erupts. In the aftermath, a small, dark slime creature appears, announcing that the wind magic mantis has been successfully subjugated. Meanwhile, outside a large building cordoned off with tape, a voice announces that a search party of 20 people has arrived and will now begin their operation. The search is successful. A report states that 3 missing students were found on the first floor. One of them, a young woman identified as Ichino's Kid, is unconscious and being evacuated on a stretcher to a waiting ambulance. Within a damaged section of the dungeon, a subordinate reports to Captain Sudiura. She informs him that despite a thorough investigation, they have found no monsters anywhere in the vicinity. He listens intently, his gaze sweeping over the long, debris-strewn corridor as a subordinate pauses before continuing her report. She elaborates that while no creatures are present, there are definite traces that a monster was there, along with the aftermath of a powerful wind magic attack. Sugiura silently observes the immense cracks spiderwebbing across a destroyed circular gate, confirming her assessment. The captain's mind processes the information, identifying the combatants. He concludes that the creature was undoubtedly a soul mantis, one that had been incubated within this very artificial dungeon, and he is struck by the sheer power of the attack that defeated it. His brow furrows in consternation. He cannot fathom a reason for someone to repeatedly unleash such devastating magic, especially against a creature as formidable as a soul mantis, a monster typically found only in the deepest layers. Standing at the edge of a deep, jagged chasm torn through the dungeon floor, the full scale of the destruction becomes apparent. He voices his bewilderment, questioning just what kind of battle could have possibly taken place here. In a hospital room, Yuma Midamura sits up in bed as Usawa Rei visits him. She reassures him that although she was admitted for a precautionary checkup, she is perfectly fine. He quietly acknowledges her words. 1 week has passed since the incident. Back in the room, Rei asks if he is all right. As he looks away, his thoughts drift to the events that have transpired. Rei continues, expressing her gratitude to Amazuo Rue and Kagurazaka Shion, crediting them for their rescue. Yuma can only offer a hesitant agreement. A rapid sequence of events flashes through his mind. The slime creature manifesting size, scaling a wall to the 4th floor, frantically searching for the missing Ichino's Kid, and narrowly escaping just before a rescue team arrived. His recollection is interrupted by another memory. His acquaintance, Mishiya, loudly proclaims that it was Amazuo and Kagurazaka who rescued Ichino's. The news leaves Yuma utterly stunned. The realization hits him with full force. While he was desperately fighting the creature he knew as Wind Magic Kamakiri, the entire incident had been resolved and credited to others. Rei, seeing his shocked expression, looks at him with concern. He remembers the official ceremony held at the SDI. Amazuo and Kagurazaka were publicly honored by the state for rescuing a student attacked by a monster. From the audience, Rei had smiled, expressing her sincere gratitude and her belief in their bright future. The memory of Mishiya's harsh words returns. He had scornfully compared Yuma to Amazuo, yelling about how Amazuo risked his life to save a girl from monsters in a dungeon, while Yuma was supposedly cowering in a bathroom. Another acquaintance tried to interject, noting that people's physical conditions differ, but Mishiya's tirade continued. Mishiya had pressed on, saying he initially thought Yuma had gone to help Ichino's. Flustered, Yuma could only stammer that such a thing would be impossible, as he can't even use magic. Mishiya seemed to accept the excuse, but the humiliation lingered. He recalls watching Amazuo and Kagurazaka from afar, surrounded by admirers. His peers commented on how the two were now being scouted by major corporations, their futures after graduating from SDI secured and bright. Yuma could only look on, his expression hardening. Back in the present, Yuma stares blankly into space. His mother's voice cuts through his thoughts, calling his name. Usawa Rei and Mamizu are with her. Rei asks what's wrong, noting that he's been spacing out. He quickly dismisses her concern, claiming it's nothing. He sits by Usawa Rei's hospital bed as she recounts the dungeon incident. She explains that while she has a strange feeling about what happened, her memory, after falling through the floor, is almost completely gone. However, she adds that there is one thing she does remember. As she continues, Rei mentions that she has a vague feeling she heard Yuma's voice. The revelation causes him to spit out his drink in a sudden, violent spray. Startled, Rei asks what's wrong. Yuma quickly claims he just choked on his tea, internally panicking that she might remember more. Rei presses on, wondering if the voice she heard, a memory tied to the image of a menacing armored figure, was just her imagination. Yuma loudly refutes the idea, insisting it's impossible since he wasn't even in the dungeon. His forceful denial seems to convince her. Rei looks down, concluding that it must have been a mistake. Relieved, Yuma thinks to himself that it was a close call, but he managed to get through it. Sometime later, dressed in a tracksuit, he stands with a look of resolve. He has made a decision. Withdrawal. He stands before an SDI instructor, who asks if he's sure about his decision. The instructor notes that in 2 months, Yuma's mana index hasn't increased by a single point. Still, Yuma asks if there's any chance for one last check. The instructor dismisses the idea, telling him that what's no good is no good. He gets uncomfortably close, putting a hand on Yuma's shoulder and mockingly offering one more measurement, causing Yuma to recoil. The instructor's tone turns severe. He tells Yuma that he's young and can start over, bluntly stating that he has no talent and should be glad to give up now. He lectures that being an explorer is dangerous, and with his lack of ability, he would only be a nuisance to others and eventually get himself killed, an outcome he assumes Yuma would hate. He continues his forceful lecture, explaining that what's required of explorers is talent, the overwhelming power to defeat monsters. He declares that Yuma, lacking mana, is decisively missing that quality. With that, he hands over a document, identifying it as a withdrawal notice. The instructor dismisses him, telling him to try his best somewhere else. As Yuma walks away, clutching the paper, he passes other dejected students who have met the same fate. The notice confirms his expulsion, withdrawal. The sun shines brightly over the sprawling cityscape, casting long shadows and illuminating a seemingly ordinary day. In the quiet suburbs, the small, dark creature, Mamizu, leaps playfully through the grass before suddenly stopping, tilting its head as it looks up toward the nearby house. Inside that very house, Cookie Midamura, known as Yuma, idles away the hours. He lies on his bed, then sprawls across the floor in boredom, before finally standing up to stare at something on his wall. A sudden jolt of awareness strikes him. His eyes widen in shock as he glances at a calendar and realizes with a start that a full month has already passed since he left the SDI. The shock gives way to self-recrimination. He recalls how he had intended to cherish every single day, but instead, he has slipped back into the aimless lifestyle of his high school days. Staring at the sign on his wall proclaiming his goal to become a first-class explorer, he thinks how embarrassing that ambition now seems. He had believed that the power to transform into a monster would guarantee his success as a top-tier explorer. The memory of that monstrous form flashes in his mind, a stark reminder that reality proved to be far less forgiving. His self-assessment continues, cataloging a series of foolish mistakes. He neglected to report the dungeon, ignored the legal requirement for a permit, and recklessly consumed magic ores. He concludes he has become a great fool, a monster, and that his ignorance is frightening. Despite it all, his mana index remains at 0. The only positive outcome was being able to save Keed. As he stews in his thoughts, his phone lights up with a message. It's from Usuare. She announces that she's on leave from the SDI and has returned home, asking if he wants to get lunch together. The invitation leads them to a local diner. Ray observes that he seems surprisingly cheerful, considering he was dismissed. Flustered, Yuma insists he wouldn't stay depressed forever. She teases him, saying she had hoped he'd be happy to see her. He blushes, admitting that's a lie and that he's actually very happy to see her again after so long. Settling into their conversation, Ray brings up his future. She asks if he plans to return to university in the autumn. He confirms that this is his intention, noting that he had already filed for a leave of absence. He sat with his parents, explaining his decision. Ultimately, he would return to university for the fall semester. It was a promise he had made to them before joining the SDI, and after further discussion upon his departure, he had accepted it. He could not become an explorer. It was simply out of his hands. His thoughts shifted back to his conversation with Usuo Ray. She had asked how he was, and he turned the question back on her. She cheerfully reported that her mana index had already grown to 700, much to his shock. Furthermore, she revealed she had a job offer from a medical venture company called MedIris, which wanted to hire her as a savior. He was stunned by how smoothly everything was progressing for her. Ray had continued excitedly, exclaiming that her mana index had even surpassed 1,500, a number that flattened Yuma with astonishment. She then added that Amazoru was also improving his scores steadily. She speculated that he might reach an index of 2,000 by graduation, a new record for the SDI. His future employment was already secured with El Sheed, the very company he'd wanted to join, who were apparently eager to recruit him. The news hit Yuma hard. Amazoa was being courted by the largest, most elite corporation in the industry. The realization of their success left him feeling crushed. He perceived a vast, growing gap between himself and the two of them, who seemed so brilliant and dazzling. He desperately wished to be like them, but felt left behind, collapsing to his knees. From that memory of despair, Ray's voice emerged. She had admitted to feeling disappointed when he left the SDI, but she firmly believed that there was a path suited just for him. With a bright smile, she had told him to do his best. Her words echoed in his mind as he lay in bed. A path suited for me. He recalled the day he left the institute, when his father and another man, Ryosuke Mashiya, had appeared, telling him not to mope around. With a sigh, he flopped over. The memory continued. Mashiya had tried to console him, insisting that this wasn't a rejection of him as a person and that everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. But at the time, the words offered little comfort. Another acquaintance, a young man with thick glasses, had then spoken. He explained that since he was finally reintegrating into society after being a shut-in, he was going to look for a dungeon-related job. Mashiya added that he himself would return to his old job as a carpenter, having realized it suited him better. The man with glasses acknowledged that major companies were out of the question, but that smaller enterprises still had job openings. He then asked Yuma why he was looking for dungeon work if he hadn't graduated from the SDI. Reflecting on it now, Yuma found their determination admirable. Even with one path closed, they were doing their best with what they had. His mind, though recently dejected, now raised with a flicker of hope. He messaged his acquaintance, Hamanaka, asking about the small and medium-sized dungeon-related companies he had mentioned at the SDI farewell. To his surprise, Hamanaka quickly replied, promising to send over job data he had collected. As he looked at the message, Yuma realized that while these companies weren't the major corporations his friends had joined, they were legitimate businesses authorized for dungeon entry. This meant that securing a job with one of them was a viable path to making a living. He finally understood why he had never taken down the motivational paper on his wall. Even after being expelled from the SDI, a part of him still harbored a lingering attachment to his dream. For the first time, he felt a true, burning aspiration to turn that dream into a reality. This was his last chance. He had pleaded with his parents, securing a deal. If he could find a job within the 2 months before he was due to return to university, he could follow his own path. If not, he would have to give up, graduate, and find work at a regular company. Fueled by this ultimatum, he began picking out promising companies from the list Hamanaka provided. Despite the handicaps of having no mana, being an SDI dropout, and being unable to mention his transformation ability, he furiously began filling out applications. He would start his job hunt now and become an explorer. 2 weeks later, his phone displayed a message from the East Japan Dungeon Corporation. It was a formal, polite rejection, informing him that after careful consideration, they would not be proceeding with his application. The rejections kept coming. Collapsed on the floor of his room, Yuma's hope shattered. Why? He screamed his mind. Why do I keep failing? The desperate thought struck him. Was it because he had been too greedy, only applying to the most promising companies? Was he so worthless that he couldn't even get a foot in the door? 1 month into his job search, Yuma Midamura stares at an email on his computer screen. After receiving rejections from every other company he applied to, he finally has an invitation for a first-round interview with a company called GIG. He muses that while he might have been aiming too high before, he should be able to get into a smaller company like this one. His resolve hardens as he stands before a modern office building. He is determined to become an explorer, certain that if he can just convey his passion, a company will surely want him. He steels himself to get through the interview, no matter what. Now inside, dressed in a suit and tie, sweat beads on his forehead. The reality of his first corporate job interview sets in, and his confidence wavers. He is stunned to see a long line of other applicants. He hadn't expected so many people for a company that wasn't a major corporation. Glancing at the candidates beside him, he assumes they are university students and feels a pang of anxiety, thinking they look incredibly intelligent. He quickly reminds himself that this is an interview for explorers, where intellect shouldn't be the most important factor. During the group interview, the other candidates present their qualifications. A young woman states she is a fourth-year student at Albert Women's Academy. Another candidate, a young man, introduces himself as a fourth year from Itsutsubashi University, adding that he has obtained a national qualification as a Level 2 dungeon paramedic and has attended 40 dungeon experience events hosted by the El-Shid and Isis companies. Yuma is internally reeling from this information. He has never heard of a dungeon paramedic and is shocked to hear the name of the prestigious Itsutsubashi University. He realizes the caliber of his competition is far beyond what he imagined. An interviewer then engages with the university student, asking if Professor Nakani is still teaching there. The student confirms, and the interviewer seems pleased, not at all surprised by the connection. The horrifying realization dawns on him. Intelligence might be necessary after all. When his turn comes, he stands, clutching his fists at his sides. He nervously introduces himself as Mitake Yuma, stating that he will be graduating from high school this spring. He continues, admitting he has no special knowledge or qualifications, but emphasizes his extensive experience inside dungeons, which he wishes to utilize. One of the interviewers notes his age, 18, and comments that most applicants are university students or working adults, so they can sense his motivation. Yuma feels a wave of relief, believing his passion is being recognized, and thanks them. His relief is short-lived. An interviewer poses a sharp question. If he's entered dungeons so many times, surely his mana index must have increased, hasn't it? The question strikes Yuma like a physical blow, and his face contorts in shock and panic. The interviewer observes his reaction and understands immediately. He notes Yuma's status as a midterm dropout from the SDI. With a polite but firm tone, he thanks Yuma for his time and calls for the next candidate. Yuma stands frozen, the reality of his failure crashing down upon him. He sits slumped on the steps outside the building, the weight of his rejection pressing down on him. His suit, once a symbol of hope, now feels like a costume for a part he failed to get. He stares blankly into the middle distance, utterly dejected. But then, a flicker of defiance. He tells himself that he has the will, the goals, and the drive to work hard now. He is not the same person he was in high school, aimless and cynical. He vows to show them, to show everyone, that he is different now. The wave of confidence crashes into a wall of immediate regret. He buries his face in his hands, groaning in embarrassment. Idiot, 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 he thinks, mortified by his own bold declaration. He realizes he was naive, thinking too little of the challenges ahead. As he cringes, he remembers his parents' words. They had questioned his plan to become an explorer, suggesting that graduating from university and getting a stable corporate job was the better path. He understands now. They must have known this would happen. The thought of his own failure is agonizing. A voice cuts through his despair. A young man in a suit, holding out a can of coffee, tells him to drink it, remarking that he looks like he's about to die. Yuma looks up, surprised by the sudden gesture of kindness. He takes the coffee and sits on a bench with the stranger. The man confirms that Yuma was at the GIG company interview, revealing that he was there too. Still dazed, Yuma can only manage a quiet word of thanks. The stranger explains that he was about to go home, feeling dejected himself. But then he saw Yuma looking even more miserable. Recognizing him from the interview, he felt he had to do something, suggesting they have a coffee to calm down. Noticing the man's accent, Yuma asks if he's from the Kansai region. The man playfully retorts that he's actually from Chiba and jokingly calls Yuma a fake Kansai person, declaring that he must have failed the interview. Yuma is startled by the sudden, light-hearted accusation. The man's friendly demeanor returns as he asks Yuma's age, noting how young he seems. Yuma explains that he just graduated high school, making him 18. The man expresses his admiration, impressed that someone so young would try to get a job in the dungeon industry. Yuma admits with a sigh that he hadn't realized how tough it would be, thinking it was a more dangerous and less competitive field. The man listens, then remarks that Yuma's perception is based on an old story, a thing of the past. The man in the suit continued his explanation, his finger raised to emphasize his point. He told Yuma that dungeon research has progressed significantly, leading to better weapons for fighting monsters. He explained that while the industry used to sell itself on dreams, prospects, and high pay, it's now catching up on safety, making it a much more sought-after field. He mused that with reduced uncertainty, anyone would be drawn to a high salary. He likened the modern seeker to a celebrity, a professional athlete, or an influencer, a group he counted himself among. Noticing Yuma's stunned silence, he asked what was wrong. The revelation crushed Yuma, who had always viewed the seeker profession as the antithesis of stability, a wild dream to pursue. Seeing the young man's despair, the stranger smiled reassuringly. He told him not to get so down, pointing out that there was no need to be obsessed with this one particular company. He then formally introduced himself as Tanoji Akito. With a confident grin, he suggested that if they were both fortunate enough to land jobs, they should meet again out in the field. As Tanoji spoke, Yuma thought to himself that this man seemed like he could succeed on his communication skills alone. He admitted that while Tanoji was a bit strange, his concern was welcome and had actually cheered him up a little. His mind then reeled back to a term he'd overheard, dungeon paramedic. He was shocked that such a qualification even existed. His entire strategy had been based on the assumption that the job was dangerous, meaning the competition would be low. He lamented that he knew nothing beyond his formal studies in SDI classes, realizing Tanoji was right. He had been relying solely on internet research. Spurred by this humbling realization, Yuma walked with new purpose into a nearby bookstore. In a bookstore, Cookie Mitamura stands before shelves packed with literature on dungeon exploration. Titles on monster slaying, explorer careers for office workers, and making money from low-level magic stones surround him as he prepares for his next attempt to enter the field. He resolves that he won't embarrass himself in the next interview. He understands that to compete with other job seekers who have formal education and experience, he needs knowledge, especially now that he's no longer at the SDI. He reflects that there are many people he needs to catch up to, not just Rue and Keed. His resolve is tested. During his second interview, a man notes with disappointment that Cookie claimed to have mana on his application, but it turns out he doesn't. At the third, another interviewer laments Cookie's complete lack of experience, qualifications, and academic background. He explains that stricter regulations have increased the burden on companies, so they all want experienced personnel who can be immediately effective. Cookie realizes with frustration that every company is looking for an immediate asset. The rejections continue. A female interviewer clarifies that while it's illegal to screen applicants based on their mana index, it's realistically very difficult for someone with a 0 index. She suggests that if he were a university graduate, his chances might be better and advises him to apply again after finishing his degree before ending the meeting. Overwhelmed by failure, Cookie despairs. He wishes he could just tell them he has the ability to turn into a monster. His power lets him become a metal man, a metal slime, or even a puddle of metal, but it's useless for finding a job. He wonders if having no mana index makes it impossible from start. In a fit of frustration, he pulls out his phone and begins searching the internet. His search for Explore Jobs yields results for the public employment service, Hello Work, giving him a new, albeit less glamorous, avenue to pursue. Following this lead, he arrives at the Hello Work office. He asks the clerk at the counter if there are any job postings for explorers. The clerk confirms there are, but cautions that it's a difficult path. The clerk elaborates, explaining that most companies posting jobs, there are small businesses. He warns that it's unlikely Cookie will find a position with desirable conditions and asks if he can suggest companies for interviews. But Cookie stands firm. He insists that he is young and can find other good opportunities, asking the clerk not to broaden the job search. With renewed determination, he declares that he only wants job listings for explorers. Complying with his request, a staff member hands him a folder containing the relevant job postings. Cookie accepts it and walks away, his expression a mixture of resolve and uncertainty. He stood in the employment office, his attention drawn to a rack of flyers. He asked an unseen clerk what they were and was told they were job advertisements brought in by companies struggling to attract applicants. Some, the clerk noted, were even dungeon-related. He picked one up, his eyes falling on the company name. A flicker of recognition crossed his face as he read it. The flyer was for a company called D-Minor Incorporated. Its design was amateurish, featuring a cartoonish, ghost-like mascot waving cheerfully. He remembered it instantly. D-Minor Incorporated was the very company mentioned in an email from Hamanaka, the one noted for being the smallest in scale with the lowest base pay, a company he had immediately disregarded. But a new thought struck him. If the conditions were that poor, wouldn't that also mean fewer competitors? He clutched the flyer, a wave of stress washing over him. Until now, he had been applying to companies with the best conditions, starting from the top. He began to wonder if that entire approach had been a mistake. His mind, clouded by fatigue, latched onto a new strategy. Instead of aiming high, he would start from the bottom, applying to companies with the worst conditions. Then, if he received multiple offers, he could simply choose the best among them. With his resolve hardened, he admitted to himself that, at this point, he just wanted the security of being accepted anywhere. He would apply. Following the address on the flyer, he soon found himself standing before a rather dated building. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he was in the right place. He stepped inside, only to be confronted by a steep, narrow staircase that creaked under his weight. The cluttered surroundings made him question if this was truly an office or just a storage space. Reaching the top, he found a door half buried in clutter. He called out, announcing he was Mitaka, here for an interview. A cheerful voice from within replied, telling him to wait just a moment. He waited for only a moment before the door slid open. A young woman with long, light-colored hair greeted him with a cheerful apology for the messy state of the office, ushering him inside. As he stepped in, Cookie, dressed formally in a suit, couldn't help but notice the stark difference in atmosphere compared to every other company he had visited. When she asked about his travel time, he replied that it took about an hour and a half. He then began his formal introduction for the interview, but she quickly interjected, clarifying with a wave of her hands that she wasn't the one he'd be meeting. She tilted her head with a disarmingly sweet smile. With that same cheerful demeanor, she explained that she was merely an office worker handling accounting and general affairs, and that the company president would be the one conducting the interview. Turning towards the back of the cluttered room, she called out loudly, "Hey, President, the interviewee is here. Get up." The casual address left Cookie utterly stunned. President, his mind reeled. A bead of sweat formed on his temple as he wondered if he had somehow gotten the time wrong. From behind a pile of clutter, a large, muscular man with a rugged face and dark goatee sat up, looking as if he had just been woken from a deep sleep. His intense gaze fell upon Cookie. "Oh, you're here," he grumbled, gesturing vaguely. "Well, sit down." The sight of the imposing figure, the apparent president, sent a jolt of pure terror through Cookie. Inside the office of D-Minor, a man with a powerful build and a dark goatee points assertively. He introduces himself as Kanzaki Kutaru, the company president. Beside him, a young woman with long, light hair stands quietly as he identifies her as his daughter, Kanzaki Maika. Facing them, Cookie Midamura's jaw is clenched with nervousness. He internally scolds himself, thinking he shouldn't be intimidated by the president's muscular physique. He steps forward and formally presents his resume. As Kanzaki takes the document, Cookie's attempt to remain calm backfires, making him even more aware of the president's intimidating presence. He notes the man's sharp gaze, powerful muscles, and a distinct smell of alcohol, which only amplifies his anxiety. Kanzaki begins to read, his eyes landing on Cookie's age, 18, a high school graduate. Cookie worries this is a bad sign. The president remarks that it's unusual, as most new applicants to the industry are university students or older adults. His gaze continues down the resume, and he notes Cookie's midterm withdrawal from the SDI. Cookie panics internally, realizing the implication. Dropping out means his mana index was below the required standard. He braces himself, certain Kanzaki will confirm his mana index is 0. The interview feels just like all the others. A familiar sense of dread washes over Cookie as he sits in the small office. He feels he is on the same path to failure and can't shake the feeling that this will only end in another rejection. From an observation room, two figures watch the proceedings. A woman with glasses remarks that a mana index of 0 makes the situation realistically difficult. Her bald colleague agrees, adding that with no experience, qualifications, or education to speak of, the candidate's chances are indeed slim. The weight of this reality crushes Cookie's spirit. He lowers his head in defeat, wondering if there are truly no dungeon-related companies that would ever hire someone without mana. Just as despair sets in, a spark ignites within him. His hand clenches into a tight fist. He thinks to himself that perhaps this is the very moment he cannot afford to give up. He snaps his head up, his eyes burning with a sudden, fierce determination. The abrupt shift in his demeanor startles Kinzoku, who looks up from the resume and asks, "What's wrong?" He sits rigidly, hands clasped in his lap, the tension palpable. Gathering his courage, he hesitantly asks the company president if it's truly difficult to work there with little to no mana. The president, Kinzoku, regards him with a flat, unreadable expression. To his surprise, the president dismisses the concern entirely. He states that a mana index is irrelevant, as it can be raised while on the job. Their company doesn't fixate on it. A wave of relief washes over Cookie, who realizes his fears may have been unfounded. The president, however, seems to be pondering something. Suddenly, the president's demeanor shifts. He leans forward aggressively, shouting that there is something far more important he needs to ask. Pointing a finger directly at the startled Cookie, he bellows, demanding to know why he wants to become an explorer and to hear his motivation. Cookie flinches, stunned by the sudden intensity. The president declares that his answer will be the sole factor in deciding whether or not he is hired. Panic grips him. He realizes this is a company that might actually give him a chance, even with a mana index of 0. He cannot, under any circumstances, give the wrong answer. His mind flashes back to the interview preparation books he'd studied. They all advise that framing one's ambition as a desire to contribute to society through the company's work would convey passion and enthusiasm. Many companies, the books claimed, seek to achieve social contribution through their business. Just as he opens his mouth to recite the book's advice, the president cuts him off. He warns Cookie that if he dares to mention social contribution, he will be rejected on the spot. The president's face twists with disgust. He explains that he's sick of the recent trend of young applicants giving sanctimonious speeches about working for the good of society. He declares that he absolutely despises that kind of person. He lunges across the desk, grabbing Cookie by his tie. He roars that he isn't interested in some superficial, polished answer. He demands to hear Cookie's root, his true, fundamental reason. The president continues his intense interrogation, demanding to know when Cookie decided to become an explorer or even when he first became aware of them. Cookie's mind spins, the word root echoing in his thoughts. From the side, Kinzoku sighs, watching the familiar scene unfold. At the D-Minor office, the company president, Kinzoku, pumps his fist with vigor. He announces that it's Amazawa Rue's first day of work and that they're going to tackle it with high spirits, as Kinzoku and Amazawa look on. Kutaru then turns to a man with glasses, asking him to explain the situation to the new hire. The man introduces himself as Tanaka, Amazawa's new trainer, and states that the first thing they must do is lay out the plan. As the explanation begins, Amazawa's composure shatters. Tears stream down his face as he despairs, wondering aloud if his mana index can truly be raised. Kutaru immediately tries to console him, shouting not to cry and that it will be okay. He reminds Amazawa that the creature he defeated during the SDI was just a weak monster for judging potential, implying that he was previously told he couldn't make it as an explorer. Tanaka calmly continues his explanation, stating that their ultimate goal is to challenge the Red Dungeon. To achieve this, he says they need Amazawa to raise his mana index and become strong enough to fight. He reassures Amazawa that the monsters where they are going today will definitely raise his stats. When he reveals their destination is the Red Dungeon, Amazawa is stunned, asking in disbelief if they are truly going to attempt to conquer it. Tanaka clarifies that they are going to procure goods. He explains that D-Minor is a subcontractor that supplies dungeon byproducts, like fire demon stones from the Red Dungeon, to larger corporations. Therefore, their first task is to enter the Blue Dungeon, where water magic is effective, to raise Amazawa's mana and collect demon stones. This, he declares, is Amazawa's first job. With the plan understood, Kutaru leads the way into a vast storeroom lined with shelves of equipment. He announces that the first order of business is to choose a weapon. Amazawa scans the weapons, pointing one out and asking about it. Kutaru cautions him, however, warning that with his current low mana index, there are many weapons he won't be able to use. Kutaru then presents a mace, identifying it as the water vein mace made by the L-Sheet Company. He explains it's a magic-imbued weapon that can be charged with water magic inside a dungeon, noting that Amazawa used one in his SDI test. He trails off, however, realizing that with his current low mana, even this might be unusable. Seeing Amazawa Rue's distress, Kutaru sighs. Rue confesses that despite being in SDI's top class, he never even had the chance to touch a magic-imbued weapon. Realizing the depth of the misunderstanding, Kutaru decides he needs to explain everything from the very beginning. He begins by clarifying that mana by itself is useless. It's only by consuming magic stones that one can use magic, a phenomenon he calls mana staining. This process converts a person's colorless mana into colored mana, which some also call magic power. Using a diagram, he illustrates that the magnitude of this magic power directly corresponds to the strength of the spells one can cast. He continues, explaining that even with magic, only high-level explorers can actually fight monsters effectively, as most people simply lack sufficient magic power. To compensate, magic-imbued weapons were created. He presents a mace, noting that such weapons are designed to generate high attack power, even with a small amount of magic. Tanaka chimes in, clarifying that these weapons are essentially tools to supplement magic, and that a magic stone is used in their core. Rue asks if Elshide, the world-famous dungeon armament manufacturer, makes them, which Tanaka confirms. Kataru then presents an entirely different option to Rue, a battery-powered stun gun. He explains that since Rue has no magic power, a magic-imbued weapon is useless to him. Therefore, he must use a battery-powered device. He shows other options, like a stun baton and a stun knife, telling Rue to choose what he likes. He adds that while they are far weaker than lightning magic, they are quite effective against water attribute monsters. While searching through a box of equipment, Rue's eyes land on something else entirely. Kataru recognizes it as an old, obsolete starter model from Elshide, remarking that it was known for being incredibly sturdy. He advises Rue to pick whichever weapon is easiest for him to use. Blushing, Rue hesitantly states that, if possible, he would like to use this one. He lifts his chosen weapon, a large, black hybrid of a hammer and an axe, a confident smile spreading across his face. The weapon's form is strikingly similar to the nail hammer he once used to defeat countless metal slimes. The memory of his past life floods his mind, and he understands the source of this profound sense of familiarity. It feels perfectly suited to his hand. Rue beams, confirming his choice. Watching him, Kataru remarks that it's a good thing. Choosing a weapon that suits one's own nature is always for the best. Tanaka nods in agreement. He examines the weapon, referring to it simply as a pickle. The company president, Kinzoku, admits that while it likely had a longer, official name, he can't recall it either, having only ever known it by that simple term. With the weapon settled, Kataru declares that Rue now needs protective gear. He insists that protecting one's head is crucial, handing over a standard construction helmet. He follows this with household rubber gloves and ordinary work boots, explaining that protecting one's feet is also vital, especially in damp dungeons where stun weapons might be used. After changing into a tracksuit, Rue stands fully outfitted. Kataru looks on, declaring his new explorer equipment complete and perfect. From the side, Kanzaki Maika watches and wishes him well for his upcoming dungeon exploration. As he gets ready, his gaze falls upon his hands, one holding a portable gas burner, the other a spray can. A sudden, intense feeling of déjà vu strikes him. A voice reflects on past efforts, realizing that the struggle to defeat metal slimes during high school was not a mistake after all. The voice, belonging to Tanaka, then calls out across the cityscape. "Let's go, Yuma-kun." Heeding the call, Yuma follows Tanaka toward a dungeon entrance. He remarks that he's been here before, but only ever entered the first floor, expressing his amazement that such a sight continues so far underground. Their descent takes them deep into the Tokyo Musashino Blue Dungeon. After walking on the treacherous terrain for over 2 hours, Yuma is visibly exhausted. He pants, admitting that just getting down to the 12th floor is incredibly tiring. He looks out over the vast, ruined expanse and asks how much further it is to their destination on the 14th floor. Tanaka estimates about 40 more minutes. When Yuma questions if there's any form of transport, Tanaka explains that the narrow passages don't allow for cars, and the risk of sudden monster attacks makes motorbikes unfeasible. He concludes that walking is simply the safest option. Despite the long trek, Tanaka seems completely unfazed. Yuma watches him, thinking to himself that he had underestimated the older man based on his physique, amazed that he shows no signs of fatigue after so much walking. As they face another long stretch of descending stone stairs, Tanaka tells him not to complain and to simply do his best to keep going. Their path is soon blocked by a creature identified as a blue frog. Tanaka casually remarks that it's bigger than the Shiba Inu he keeps at home, while Yuma stares in disbelief, questioning if he's really supposed to fight the massive frog. He grips his long-handled tool, but finds himself hesitating. The creature's croak echoes as Yuma thinks about his resistance to killing a monster that looks so much like a normal animal. Shaking off his reluctance, he steels his resolve. With a determined shout to brace himself, he swings his weapon down with all his might. The blow lands true, and the blue frog erupts in a spray of dark fluid. Yuma stands over the remains of the creature, his task complete. He recoils, his face a mask of horror as he is drenched in the foul, sticky fluid that erupted from the defeated creature. He shouts in disgust at the slimy mess covering him, but Tanaka simply laughs. The veteran explains that blue frogs spray their body fluids everywhere when they sense danger, and that Yuma should have been prepared. Tanaka reminds him that he won't be able to defeat them unless he presses the switch on his weapon to send a current through it, chiding him for getting covered in the fluid unnecessarily. Desperate, Yuma asks for any advice to make the task easier. Tanaka points out that the two 9-volt batteries in the hammer will run out quickly, so he should only activate the current for the brief moment his attack connects. As another blue frog watches nearby, Tanaka simply tells him to get ready for the next one. He lunges into the next fight, but the result is the same. Another explosive splash of viscous liquid that completely engulfs him. The grueling day wears on. A 3-hour round trip by train, followed by a 6-hour trek on foot through the dungeon, all culminating in this repetitive, slimy work. With an expression of utter exhaustion, he dispatches another creature. Looking out over the desolate, ruined landscape of the dungeon, he recalls Tanaka's cheerful words, promising that he'll get used to it. The thought is hardly comforting. Meanwhile, in the Otemakai district of Tokyo, the modern skyscraper headquarters of SLIMES, the largest dungeon-related corporation, stands tall next to a more classical structure. Inside, a division head named Honda thanks Amazawa Rue for coming after his classes. He inquires about Amazawa's current mana index, and the young man reports it has risen to 1521. Honda is impressed, noting that while Amazawa has absorbed around 1,200 points, the SDI cannot provide magic stones for further growth. Amazawa is unconcerned, stating that SLIMES can provide what he needs. Honda then confirms if he's okay with focusing on a single type of magic, to which Amazawa readily agrees. Honda notes Amazawa's aptitude for fire magic and asks if his ultimate goal is to become the next Flame Emperor, Albeltmuller. With unwavering confidence, Amazawa confirms this, declaring that if he is to aim for something, it will be to become the world's strongest. Honda laughs, pleased by this ambition, calling him a promising rookie. He then presents a specific request to the young prodigy. He wants Amazawa to go to the Green Dungeon in Fukuoka and use it to raise his mana index even further. He listens as Honda explains the rationale for the assignment. The executive notes that the Green Dungeon is filled with insect-type monsters, making it an ideal training ground to hone his fire magic. Honda adds that the company is eager for him to gain practical experience, and they have already coordinated with the SDI. The executive continues, promising that the Fukuoka branch's Explorer group will offer full support. SLIMES will provide the latest weaponry and even custom-made armor. Honda states that the company has high expectations for him, as they spare no expense in cultivating talented explorers, and urges him to quickly surpass his mana index's limits to become a true asset. At that very moment, in the Blue Dungeon, Yuma is suddenly drenched in a thick, viscous fluid, recoiling as it splatters across his head and shoulders. He grits his teeth, drenched but resolute. From nearby, Tanaka's voice calls out, urging him to raise his mana index and become a powerful asset soon. Kanzaki Maika stares at a mana measurement device, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. This is strange. Why would this happen? She murmurs to herself. The title for this section reads, Chapter 18, The Red Dungeon. She turns to her president, Kutaru, with a sense of urgency. President, listen to this. What happened? She asks. Her question hangs in the air as a memory of the past 4 days flashes by. Yuma, alongside Tanaka, had been fighting diligently, even as a blue frog monster from the 14th floor struck him after he had defeated more than 20 of them. In the office, Yuma explains the established principles of mana acquisition, highlighting the anomaly of his own situation. He notes that his mana index remaining at 0 is illogical. He details how defeating certain monsters is known to yield predictable mana gains. For example, while low-level slimes in the Blue Dungeon offer negligible amounts, defeating 20 blue frogs from the 14th floor should have definitively raised his index by 4 to 6 points. Maika holds up the device, questioning if it's broken. Flustered, Yuma recalls his own varied readings from other devices, like 1107 and 623, which the female interviewer with glasses confirms were accurate at the time. He wonders aloud if he just has a constitution that makes it difficult to gain mana. Kutaru dismisses the idea, clarifying that while individual growth rates vary, a complete lack of increase is unheard of. He suggests they continue to observe for a while longer. 2 more days pass. Yuma sits at his desk, his posture slumped in dejection. Across from him, Kutaru watches with a serious expression, his muscular arms crossed over his chest. Kutaru finally speaks, acknowledging the gravity of the situation. He realizes now that when Yuma said his mana index was 0, it was literal, not just a figure of speech for a very low number. The situation is indeed an anomaly. The mana meter's display reads a stark 0000. Yuma recounts his frustrating history. For 2 years, his mana index has remained at 0, even after defeating mana-rich red slimes at the SDI. He recalls being asked if anyone ever found this strange, but admits he was only ever told he had no talent. Kutaru listens, his expression hardening. Kutaru then explains the harsh truth of why his condition was never investigated. The appliance store clerks, the dungeon staff, and even the SDI personnel all saw the 0 reading and made a swift judgment. It wasn't worth the time or cost to investigate someone they deemed worthless. As Yuma listens, the weight of being consistently dismissed as talentless settles upon him, his face darkening with the painful realization. Suddenly, Kutaru slams his hand on the desk and leaps to his feet, his voice a powerful roar that fills the office. But I'm different, he declares with unwavering conviction. You are an important new explorer for our company. He leans in close to the stunned Yuma, pointing a finger for emphasis. He admits he's never heard of a constitution that completely prevents mana gain, but he can't say it's impossible. He promises they will investigate it thoroughly, and that Yuma can worry about the future after that. So don't you dare hang your head like that, he commands. He is overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down his face as he asks what he should do, admitting he has no leads. His new boss, Kutaru, tells him to stop crying, assuring him that he has a plan. Kutaru elaborates, stating he has an acquaintance, a scholar who researches the effects of mana on the human body. He intends to ask this person to investigate Yuma's condition. Yuma is taken aback when Kataru reveals this scholar is his ex-girlfriend from college. Overhearing this, Maika wonders aloud if it's truly all right to involve an ex, noting that the person in question is not Kataru's wife. Maika, however, turns with a bright smile, cheerfully stating that she isn't bothered by such complicated human relationships, dismissing it to a flustered Yuma as simply adult stuff. Sometime later, Kataru leads Yuma to a dilapidated, ivy-covered building. When Yuma questions if it's a rundown factory, Kataru confirms that this is the place the scholar uses as her research lab. As they walk inside, Kataru explains that the researcher is a brilliant but eccentric biologist who studies dungeons. Because she frequently clashes with others, she is no longer welcome at any official research institutions or universities. Reaching a doorway, Kataru waves and calls out, announcing that he has brought the person they discussed. From within the lab, a woman with long dark hair turns in her chair. She asks if this is the boy she was told about. Looking directly at Yuma, she introduces herself as Aisha Kisaragi. Aisha faces him, acknowledging his strange condition of being unable to gain mana. Though she calls it an unheard-of story, she casually agrees to investigate it for him. Leaning forward with a confident smirk, she tells the nervous Yuma not to worry. She boasts that she is brilliant and will immediately find any abnormality in his body, while he internally wonders if she can truly find a cause. He sits nervously on the examination table and hesitantly poses a question to Aisha. He stammers, asking if drawing blood doesn't require a medical license, something he recalls a friend mentioning. Aisha simply looks back at him, questioning his query, while Kataru watches from the side. She coolly acknowledges that he is well-informed, prompting a surprised from Yuma. Her expression shifts to a confident, almost dismissive smile. She tells him there's no need to worry about such trivial matters, as everything she does is for the advancement of science.